Shin Yujin is a guy in his early 20s who plays an online game called War of the Gods. Everyone who has ever played an online game knows the feeling of creating a character. Going to the city center and seeing a high-level character standing out in the crowd, that was Shin Yujin's character. What not everyone knows is that in recent years he spent so much money on this game that his friends started to insult him. He understands that this is a natural reaction, but Shin likes it a lot. What can be done? His character is a high-level warrior that required a considerable amount of money to get there. Shin's character is known as free-to-play gamer. His warrior has a good appearance and great performance. This makes him not mind having invested all that money. The only problem is the lack of players on the server. When Shin logs into the game, only 6 players are online. War of the Gods is a game that almost has no players, and every day the number decreases. A wave of a hand catches our player's attention. Seeing his companions, free-to-play gamer runs to meet his party and says he just woke up. He played so much the day before that he didn't even have time to eat. He can see that his bunny friend, a beautiful character with bunny ears and blonde hair, is laughing and saying that's just level 1 pain. His other companion, Hongdae, fashionably Joseph, is surprised that free-to-play gamer is already online because he had said he was quitting the game yesterday. The warrior quickly responds that this also applies to Hongdae, who said he was quitting the game. Both are interrupted by Jojin First Sword, a player who loves to roleplay his character, and also by the closest thing Shin has to a friend in the game, the user I Don't Have a Cat, who uses a cat character. When they are hunting or raiding, his friend's buffs are essential to their success. Besides the cat avatar, Shin's friend also has great skill with his character. Now that they are together, the bunny girl asks what they are going to do. Hongdae reminds them not to forget the daily raids. But in the bunny girl's opinion, these daily raids are too difficult and drive new players away. But Shin reminds her that the game was never known anyway. The bunny girl jokes that the way they manage the server and the game's balance has also never been a priority, and there is basically no reason to play this game. Shin says that the game has to be difficult so that when you overcome the challenges it feels satisfying, and Joshin agrees. Then he asks free-to-play gamer about a rumor that he earned all that money just with bitcoins. And indeed, bitcoins made a lot of money for Shin, and he managed to fund his entire character. The bunny girl mocks Jojin for not knowing this yet, and Jojin had heard about it but thought it was a lie. He was impressed by the millions Shin had already spent on the game, and the bunny girl says it's no use trying to fight him in PvP. Shin doesn't care what his colleagues say, he likes his appearance in the game. When Shin and his party head towards the daily raids, an announcement appears on Shin's monitor. This type of announcement rarely happens and makes him a bit anxious. The message says it's a pleasure to meet the users and that the announcement will be brief. The game War of the Gods has been selected for a contest thanks to the players. Everyone looks incredulously at the words appearing. Hongdae is incredulous and asks if it is really the administrator speaking, and the message replies that he is correct. The bunny girl is worried about the server closing and hopes it continues running. Everyone is devastated when they see the message to the bunny girl saying that the server will close soon. But they soon start shouting in rage, furious, and find it absurd to do this out of nowhere. Joshin says they can't end the game. Free-to-play gamer has already spent enough money to buy an apartment in the city center. The message says not to worry. Those who paid for premium content will be compensated for their contribution. Shin is getting furious and disappointed. When the message appears again, it is written that there will also be rewards for the other players. What kind of rewards? Joshin asks, and what is the point of getting rewards now that the game is ending? The message alert rings again, and the message appears with a countdown saying that in 5 minutes the server will shut down. The bunny girl is very surprised and shouts that besides the bad administration, they shut down the server suddenly. She can't believe it. Shin's best friend also can't believe it. He still thinks it's some kind of joke. Shin remains motionless in front of his computer, and the time keeps running. Shin begins to convince himself that every game eventually has an end and his server needs to shut down. There is an end to everything, even to the game he put so much love and money into. And now it is closing its doors. He remembers the good times with his party and all the raid bosses and monsters they faced, the happiness of the treasures they won together. When the countdown reaches close to 10 seconds, Shin decides to do something and tries to talk to the administrator. But he's surprised by a bright light and is teleported to another place. Shin is confused and does not understand what is happening. He sees that the time is up but the game hasn't stopped. Did they not shut down the server? Shin begins to see a silhouette coming out of the light. A mysterious woman appears before Shin's character. Nell is a young woman with white hair and a white dress. Her name is familiar to the player. He is unsure if she is a server administrator. And then Shin sends a message in the game, asking if she is an administrator and what is happening. She replies that she wanted to show her gratitude, so she came to see him in this way. But Shin seems confused. The woman explains that Shin gave a lot of support and backing to the world she created. This support was provided through the items he purchased. She thanks Shin, and now her work has managed to achieve a minimum qualification to enter a contest. Shin asks what the contest is as he searched online and found no recent video game contests. Nell says she cannot give more details, and since Shin helped her a lot, she will give him a reward even better. a special privilege. The player does not understand what good the rewards are if the server is going to shut down. But still, he sends a message wanting to know what special privilege he will receive. She responds that unfortunately, she cannot tell him what the special privilege is, but he will receive it, and will find out what it is. Looking at Shin, she warns that the player needs to accept everything that happens and not fight against destiny. This will help with his survival. After saying this, Shin's monitor turns off suddenly. The player remains motionless and incredulous sitting in his chair. He doesn't seem to believe that Nell's character looked directly at him. The boy feels restless and cannot believe this happened and how his monitor turned off out of nowhere. When he hears the message alert again, a message appears in the air in front of him saying, "Change begins now, prepare for the imminent shock." This floating message makes Shin very scared and nervous. He feels his blood pressure drop as if suffering a strong impact on his head. His vision starts to blur and he feels he is about to faint. Just before losing consciousness, Shin can only think that he still needs to format his computer. The message alert sounds again and the following words appear. Shin Yujin has won the entire inventory of his character, free-to-play gamer. The inventory is linked to his soul and synchronized with it. A counter shows that the time left for synchronization is 5 years, 8 days, 5 hours, and 32 minutes. And now the game War of the Gods can begin. The palace at Warteen is the abode of the lesser gods located in a dimension that separates Earth from the divine realm. There is where all the gods and goddesses gather for an important announcement. In the hall, all the gods can see the announcement of the competition results. The announcement shows that the goddess Nell is in first place in the War of the Gods. People comment that a Class 7 goddess had never won first place and Nell is a Class 7 goddess. While looking at the scoreboard, she thanks the player and tries to remember if his name was really Shin Yujin. The goddess remembers that due to the limited time, she created her game quickly and also could not manage the server very well. As the game was not successful and premium items were not selling, Nell did not gain power and she was a goddess of a lower class than Class 10 and could not evolve. The game without players did not give her money or power. The deity was desperate with no hope for her game. Until Shin Yujin appeared in her game, her eyes could not believe what they saw. The player bought everything available in the premium store. The goddess could hardly believe it. All of Shin's free-to-play gamer character's equipment was the best and contained speed, resistance, and strength enchantments. He bought more than 1,000 premium items to progress in the game and have a good appearance. It was surprising to Nell that such a big player willing to spend so much would appear in her game. While the warrior fought monsters and bought items with real money, this helped Nell to win first place in the contest. She murmurs that Shin Yujin did all this alone. Looking at his profile, the goddess sees that he is a single Korean. His family is not rich and he is an orphan. He became wealthy with a cryptocurrency he bought a long time ago, and over the years it increased greatly in value. The goddess was very lucky to find this player because with his support, Nell managed to finish first in a competition she thought she would do very poorly in. Therefore, the divine being will keep him around as a lucky charm, and the special rewards granted by the goddess will help him survive. Especially now that the earth is undergoing a great cataclysm, her blessings will make him much stronger. The sun shines brightly above the trees and the sky is clear with a few clouds. Meanwhile, Shin Yujin wakes up with the sunlight hitting his eyes. After getting up, the young man feels a slight headache. He begins to look around and wonders where he is. Shin realizes he's in a forest, but feels confused because he was in his room just a few minutes ago. Recognizing some ancient ruins near where he is, he realizes they are the ruins of the tutorial forest from the game War of the Gods. A system message appears in front of him saying it is the tutorial forest. The boy is startled by this message floating in the air appearing out of nowhere. Another system verification message shows that synchronization, inventory transfer, and receipt of a new talent have already been completed. Shin cannot believe what he is seeing because it is the same screen he saw in the game. The player remembers that this message was also the last thing he saw before fainting. His head still hurts from realizing this is not a dream. Shin's new ability is the talent to maintain calm and composure while facing a very strange and dangerous situation. Akira tries to remember if composure is the talent the administrator mentioned he would receive. His head still hurts thinking that the game became reality. The player can access the screen showing his character's level, skills, and known abilities. The boy is surprised to notice he already has a legendary title that increases the effect of all equipped items by 15%. Shin's title is Legendary Item Collector of the Legendary ranking. He begins to remember that this title is only given to players who have collected all the items. This can only mean one thing. And when he opens his inventory for the first time, various windows full of equipment appear around the hero. The player can hardly believe his eyes. It seems crazy to have such a large number of items. When he played online, Shin had paid to have the maximum inventory capacity, so he still had all the weapons used during his journey. However, due to the red color, the player notices that all the weapons are restricted by the character's level. The best equipment cannot be used yet. Shin begins to try to think if the game became reality or if he entered the game since all of his levels have returned to the initial stage. He remembers the warning from the goddess Nell saying to accept his destiny. and that this would help him survive. Despite being a little nervous, the boy can remain calm and tries to understand what's happening. A message warns that the player must select the tutorial difficulty before starting, from beginner to master or the infernal difficulty. Since Shin knows the game very well, he had already tried all difficulty levels. The player remembers that the hardest place in the tutorial is the wolves' den. Although he had defeated these sharp-toothed enemies, it took several attempts. Having created several different accounts and experimented with all difficulties, Shin knew that the problem with the infernal difficulty is that even with the help of his friend who used the cat avatar, they had great difficulty defeating the monsters. However, the player also knows that it is in the infernal difficulty that the greatest rewards are earned. This information makes Shin swallow hard because the boy remembers that the difficulty level can only be selected once, and now his account is his own life. While looking for his inventory, Shin tries to calculate the risks as there is no turning back, and starts to try organizing his armors to find one he can equip now. He is surprised to notice that despite being level 1, there are items that the player can already equip. Shin begins to get happy with a new idea as he realizes he can equip the legendary Super Apprentice set. But he remembers that this set can only be used in the tutorial area, and this will be crucial for the player to succeed in the infernal difficulty. After equipping his new set, Shin is confident that he will conquer the hardest level. A system message announces that the tutorial on infernal difficulty will begin and that the player must choose a weapon. A new window shows several options: a sword, an axe, and a spear. The young man begins to remember that there was a section to choose beginner weapons, but none of these weapons is more powerful than the Super Apprentice's magic sword. Shin prefers not to choose any weapon as his sword is already sufficient, and he also does not have to worry about discarding them later. A message appears showing that the player did not choose any weapon, and that by finishing the tutorial on infernal difficulty, his rewards will be much greater. The player is surprised to know that the rewards can increase even more, as this was something he did not know. With a happy expression, the hero thinks this could be a great opportunity, and that more rewards are one of his favorite things. With determination and confidence, Shin is fully equipped and begins to walk towards his new journey. Our hero arrives at the first tutorial area, which is a green and very dense forest known as the territory of the wolves. The hero runs quickly through the forest. The sounds of his steps can be heard from afar. But right behind him, we also hear many fast steps. These are from the wolves chasing him. The warrior looks back, trying to see how close the wolves are, and they are still pursuing him. He does not stop running for a moment, knowing that the wolves should not be underestimated, and those who underestimate them will be quickly buried. Individually, each wolf is not a great threat, but when they all come together and make an unstoppable circle attack. That wolf tries to hit our hero, but Shin manages to make a quick move to evade the wolf's attack. To avoid this unstoppable attack from the wolves, the only option is to methodically separate the wolves one by one. Shin will start by reducing the numbers of the group in front of him. The warrior strikes with his super novice sword, and it easily cuts through the wolves. The attack does not stop at the wolves. Its strength is such that it cuts through the tree trunks around. The crash of the falling trees scares away the birds and other animals in the region. This incredibly strong power leaves Shin astonished, but his strategy is working. The player already expected the tactic to work well, but seeing it happen before his eyes is surprising. This sword will help him overcome all the challenges ahead. Shin admires the blade of the sword that is gleaming. The player brings the sword close to his face and begins to notice its shine, but hears a slight rustling of trees behind him. A wolf that was lurking jumps to attack our hero. Shin is caught by surprise, and when he turns around, the wolf is already on top of him attacking. The warrior manages to put his arm up to protect himself from the animal's attack, causing the beast to be thrown away from Shin. Shin's armor is so strong that when the wolf tries to attack him, it is thrown far away. Even though he struck the wolf with such force, Shin's arm is still intact. The beast staggers dazed, and Shin understands how his armor's defense works. Feeling confident, the warrior advances towards the wolf, this time trying to move more boldly. He bids farewell to the wolf and raises his sword to deliver the finishing blow to the animal. The blow easily passes through the animal, and blood is splattered on the ground. The wolf's body was so large that when it falls to the ground, it makes a loud crash. Facing his dead enemy, Shin can only think that he is very calm for this situation. Despite this being his first battle and his sword already having shed blood, the young man is still strangely calm. The hero can feel the sword cutting through the wolf, but feels no other emotion, and if someone saw him now, they would think he is a psychopath. The warrior wonders if it could be the effect of the composure ability he acquired. He cannot understand how he can kill these creatures so calmly. Could he have gotten this ability just by luck? As this thought passes through Shin's mind, the sound of numerous paws can be heard on the horizon. The warrior is overthinking things and needs to hurry and get out of there. After all, the longer you stay in this area, the harder the enemies become. The hero runs towards his goal, trying to finish the area as quickly as possible. The night sky illuminates our hero, and he stands atop a huge pile of corpses. Completely drenched in sweat and panting, our hero tries to catch his breath. But he is so exhausted that he says he is seriously close to death. Hearing the system message that he had killed all the level 2 monsters and that his rewards would be grand, the boy feels happier. As he begins to move to the next level, the hero realizes his legs are still shaking and that he may have overdone it running and should rest a bit. The warrior thanks the heavens for the tactic that made him win. Running and fighting hundreds of skeletons worked very well, though it was quite exhausting. The player was still level 1 and he had few health points. What helped were his legendary equipment that contained enchantments increasing strength and agility. Shin believes he can rest a bit before facing the tutorial boss, and does so for a few hours at night. After resting, the hero goes back into the forest and walking a bit, the player manages to spot the tutorial teleport stone. As he gets closer, his expression changes to a relieved smile for having found the portal that ends the tutorial area. He starts to walk closer to his goal and remembers that the boss should be to the right of the teleport stone, but suddenly the portal disappears. Shin can feel something moving very fast and sees a quick shadow moving towards the ground, and when it hits the ground, the impact shatters everything around it. With all the debris flying towards him, the boy cannot see what's happening. Shin is thrown backward, but manages to see the silhouette of a wolf forming in the dust that had been raised. Looking closer, it is possible to see that behind the smoke, there is a werewolf roaring ferociously. With a nervous expression on his face, Shin remembers that the boss is a level 55 werewolf. The warrior notices that its fur is gray and has no name identifying the monster. He tries to imagine if the monster's attacks are the same as in the game. The werewolf is furious with red eyes of rage. Shin knows that these red eyes mean an attack is about to be launched. Thanks to his composure talent, the boy is not nervous at all. He wields his sword with firmness and determination and prepares to fight the monster. The wolf growls but keeps a great distance from our warrior, who remains in a battle stance. This monster is so surprisingly fast that the hero cannot even see the moment the werewolf leaves its place to attack him. The werewolf's blow is overwhelming and pushes our hero with great force towards the trunk of a tree. The blow is so fierce that when the hero crashes into the tree, all the air leaves his lungs. Shin tries to understand how the werewolf is so fast, but there is no time to think about anything. The werewolf is already preparing for another attack. The warrior uses all of his concentration to try to understand the werewolf's blows. But the monster is too fast and hits our hero squarely again. As the tree debris flies around him, the warrior feels the pain from the wound the monster caused him. But he manages to recognize the pattern of the werewolf's blows and its movements become more predictable. The werewolf's claws are very fast, hitting the hero, and then he decides to try to defend himself. The problem is that the monster's strength pushes him further into the tree trunk hole. By blocking the werewolf's blows, Shin starts to recognize the pattern of the attacks that the werewolf continues to execute rapidly and overwhelmingly. Its claws hit him multiple times, but despite the strong attack sequence, our warrior keeps his guard up, defending as best he can. This is possible because despite the werewolf's high attack power, our hero's armor has an even greater defensive power. And if Shin's calculations are correct, an opportunity will soon arise, and suddenly the boy hears a sudden crack. This is the sound of the werewolf's claws breaking. And this might be exactly what he was waiting for, an opportunity to act, and the werewolf continues enraged, with red eyes indicating the monster will attack again. The warrior's determined gaze is fixed on his enemy. He knows that in this situation, there is only one option for the werewolf. That option is to bite the hero, but this attack was already anticipated by Shin, and with a quick movement that uses the force of his enemy's blow, his sword pierces the werewolf. Even though his sword goes through the werewolf, the monster's body is still on top of the hero, biting him fiercely. But very calmly, the hero lets the beast bite his hand. These fingers are protected by armor, and the werewolf's teeth do not cause him any harm. His sword pierces the werewolf so deeply that it causes devastating damage, making the beast release the hero and die. Shin's plan was to hit the werewolf with a counterattack to the heart, resulting in instant death. Defeating his enemy, and with a sense of relief, he sees that the tutorial is coming to an end. A message congratulates Shin for passing the tutorial on Infernal difficulty. The message continues saying that the tutorial will end as soon as the player passes through the portal that is reopened. Shin knows he can rest as monsters will no longer appear, feeling completely exhausted but happy for having finished everything. Due to all the effort made in the adventure, our hero sits down, trembling with fatigue. The warrior is satisfied with the strategy he used, but these equipments can only be used in the tutorial area and were used very efficiently. Although there is no starting weapon as good as the Supernomus's sword, when the player finishes the tutorial, it is known that his skills will increase immensely. With a heavy heart, Shin leaves the sword aside and begins to progress to the next stage. As he starts walking towards the portal, the boy has his sudden realization and remembers something very important, the golden key in his inventory. This is important because this key gives access to a treasure with a great reward. The exhaustion almost makes Shin act hastily, but remembering this part of the game, he knows the treasure must be nearby. Shortly after, and placed close to where Shin was, the warrior continues his walk through the forest ruins. A cave is the only place left in the forest for our player to explore. Inside, a golden glow can be seen. Shin feels relieved as he finally found the golden chest. Still amazed at almost leaving this treasure behind, Shin looks at its strong glow even without any light nearby. The player puts the golden key in the chest's lock and starts turning it slowly. Shin's expression is one of complete happiness. As he opens the chest, the emotion is great and the warrior is anxious to see what's inside. With much hope in his eyes, he expects it to be something good. The golden chest is finally open, and inside there is a sphere emitting a very strong light. The player takes the sphere in his hands. It is an aged Seamden that gives a random characteristic to the player who consumes it, while holding the item of immeasurable value that even the most veteran players had difficulty obtaining because the item gives a great advantage to the player. Remembering that whenever he got one, he would consume it immediately. Acquiring a random characteristic for his character, Shin wonders what it will taste like. He brings the sphere to his mouth to eat and absorb its power, but decides against it because eating it now would be a waste. A bit thoughtful, Shin concludes that he should eat it after equipping items that increase his luck, improving his chances of acquiring a good enhancement. Accessing his inventory, the player stores the golden ball in a window to use it later. The player turns to the other side of the cave, his eyes gleaming as he imagines all the riches that might be around. Greed blinds the warrior, who starts breaking all the clay pots and vases in that cave with his fists, hoping to find treasures. He spends a good amount of time there as there are many clay vases to break and he had just started. Eventually, the hero gives up and begins to climb back up the steps to leave the cave. Disappointed at not finding anything in the vases but relieved to see the sun and having obtained his super rare item, continuing his journey. A smile appears on his face. After all, it was a long night of monster hunting and treasure finding. He remembers the difficulty of completing the entire tutorial area on Infernal difficulty. Walking towards the portal, the player can hardly wait to see all the rewards he earned for defeating the tutorial on the highest difficulty. When he reaches the portal, his hand touches the light and it bathes his entire armor. It is a warm light that flows through his fingers. The only path for our hero is to move forward. He enters the portal, and his body begins to be teleported. Now that he has finished the tutorial phase, the player proceeds through the portal to start the next level of the game. This new phase of the game involves overcoming various levels like an infinite tower where the hero must climb all the floors to the top. His body materializes and floats towards the ground of the tower. Shin tries to place his feet on the floor, but as he exits the portal and his feet touch the ground, the boy has some difficulty maintaining his balance. He feels a sense of imbalance. This trip through the portal gives the sensation that his stomach churned a lot, causing nausea and a desire to vomit. When he regains his composure, he observes the area around him and recognizes that it is indeed the Infinite Tower. Shin has been in the Infinite Tower many times while playing the online game, so his eyes easily recognize the place. This is like a waiting room for players who want to face the tower challenge. The boy notices that something is strange. He should not have come straight to the tower. He should have gone to the beginner area of Leighton Village. Leighton is the place where beginners usually go after completing the tutorial, a village with many trees around it. Shin is puzzled about how this is happening. Maybe now that the game has become part of his reality, some things have changed. He also notices that his Super Novice equipment has been removed due to the level restriction that the equipment has. With a voice command, the player can open the status screen to check his character's conditions. The screen shows that the player is at level 31 and has various points to distribute among his skills like strength, agility, endurance, and magical power. Astonished by the amount of experience he gained and the level he reached just by completing the tutorial area, the player receives a message with the option to view the rewards he earned on Infernal difficulty, and with a click, he accepts to see them. The number of rewards is enormous, and each reward appears with a new window in front of the player. This causes tremendous shock to him. Startled, Shin falls to the ground and begins to look at all the windows with various rewards. A new message shows that the player also obtained permission to enter the intermediate level tutorial. The player expected items and titles as rewards, but he did not know about this intermediate tutorial, making the boy wonder if it might be a benefit for finishing on Infernal difficulty. Feeling confident, the boy thinks this must be an exclusive privilege for the player since he managed to complete the tutorial on the highest difficulty. As he checks the rewards, he closes the windows, pushing them aside. With each new reward, Shin gets happier. The titles the hero earned are two. The first increases all experience gained by the player by 5%, and the second adds 7 more points to all his attributes. Shin remembers the next step, placing his hand on his inventory window to get a very precious item, and grabs an ultra-rare item, the legendary item box. By using this box, the character obtains a legendary level item. For a moment, Shin remembers his friend's reactions when he spent his real money on these boxes. They say he was crazy for spending so much. Shin wonders whether to open the box or not since he probably will not be able to use the item inside the box due to his low level. But he remembers something that will help a lot, so he starts to open the box. The item inside the box is a legendary rainbow sticker that reduces the level restriction of any equipment by 100 levels. The player starts to search his inventory among the various legendary items he has for a level 130 weapon. However, the best decision would be to invest in good armor. But Shin prefers to apply the sticker to a weapon and checks the options of armaments in his inventory, deciding to place the sticker on a sword. Searching through the various windows, he finally finds the sword he wants. The player applies the sticker to the item in his inventory. The best defense is a perfect offense. Shin says this as he wields his new sword. It had been a long time since he used the Koyam's long sword, a sword that increases his agility by 20 points. Although the Super Novice's sword is legendary, it is far inferior when compared to the new Koyam's sword. The difference between the swords exists because Koyam's sword should only be used by a high-level player. For his safety, Shin should level up more to make his character even stronger. If the challenges in this world are the same as the game he played, Shin knows that many monsters await him to climb the Infinite Tower. He also knows that low-level beginner players will not be able to handle the challenges ahead, and almost none will survive in the near future. A game with few veteran players and a very high difficulty level is exactly what Shin likes most about the game War of the Gods. The residential quadrant is the area where players below level 100 in the Infinite Tower stay. Our hero is teleported to an alley in this residential area. Looking around the place where he appeared, he sees that there are no players nearby. Voices can be heard at the end of the alley. A crowd, perhaps there's a good place to get some information. The player leaves the alley and sees a crowd of people talking just ahead. He is very surprised to realize something. He starts to notice a detail in all the people around him. These players also just finished the tutorial like him. Looking at the quality of the other players' equipment, he can see that they are at a high level. Shin is confused and cannot understand how the other players already have so much equipment at higher levels than he does. Although he spent a lot of time accumulating experience points on Infernal difficulty, at most a day or two should have passed. Shin looks at the other players trying to understand what he missed or if he lost something. Upon hearing the conversation between a warrior and a mage saying that several people have already died on Rank B expeditions, this warrior tells that one of the strongest guilds lures new players and kills them during expeditions. No one can question them because of their strength. Shin is shocked to learn that the veteran players have been playing for 5 years, and that some of the players in this area are only in their first or second year. To process this information, the hero spends 3 days gathering information but has no luck. The sky is always blue and the weather is so good that it can even be annoying at times. He still cannot believe that 5 years have passed since the night he was brought into the game. Other players are surprised because Shin is still wearing Earth clothes. According to the information Shin managed to gather in the last 3 days 5 years ago, a process known as the Great Migration began. The Great Migration is the phenomenon in which all Earthlings were brought into the game, forced to climb the Infinite Tower and gain special abilities. Shin cannot understand why that tower was chosen. There were several other places on the game map besides the Infinite Tower. Why were they called to that city and not to the starting village? The strangest thing is that apparently only Shin was called 5 years later. Why did he have to start the game so late? He finished the tutorial on the highest difficulty and thought he would be among the first players. But he is years behind the others. He is tired of thinking about it and gets up quickly. Shin tries to think on the bright side as he has an inventory full of legendary items. His most urgent task is to gain more levels, and then try to find out what the intermediate tutorial is and reach level 50. This way, he will be able to equip more accessories that will help him on his journey. Looking at the crowded square, the boy remembers how empty the game was and the difficulty of finding other players besides his teammates. All these people in the city cause a strange feeling, but the player is confident in his game skills. Otherwise, it would be much more difficult to adapt. While walking, the player also contemplates the possibility of Nell being a goddess, and the information obtained by Shin in the residential quadrant appears to be all correct. The hero heads to the nearest tavern to get a good meal and something to drink. The boy manages to eat a steak and drink a good mug of beer. During the meal, he thinks about how prices have changed. By selling one of the boots from his inventory, he got 50,000 coins. These coins would be enough to cover all the expenses he might have, and the item he sold was not an extremely rare item. While devouring his food, he thinks it makes more sense that not-so-rare items are more valuable. After all, the players are risking their own lives, and there's no way to buy things with real money anymore. After all, reality has become the game. This is an advantage only Shin has, because his inventory is full of premium items. Finished with his dinner, the boy places his fork on the table and gets up with great enthusiasm. Shin also replenished his potion stock. He bought the cheapest potions since it would be a waste to use expensive potions at such a low level. Now that he is prepared with his armor and restocked, the warrior feels ready to continue his journey. Especially important since the boy is going to try the challenge of climbing the Infinite Tower, but this time with his body and life at risk. There are many reasons for players to risk their necks in the Infinite Tower. The higher you progress, the better the rewards. Players who have advanced many levels in the Infinite Tower can finance a luxurious lifestyle in the residential quadrant. But there's also the demon god invasion. If no player manages to cross the last level of the tower in 15 years, it will cause a massive explosion, marking the beginning of the cataclysm known as the demon god invasion. And if that happens, the entire residential quadrant will certainly be destroyed. The challenge of the first floor is a cave with several blue crystals protruding from its walls. Inside this cave, the sound of numerous paws hitting the ground quickly can be heard. The warrior can also hear some animal noises coming from ahead, which catches his attention. With a confident look, he wonders if the animals have already left their lair. At that moment, giant rats start jumping towards him, screaming and trying to attack him. Shin prepares to strike the rats, maintaining his battle stance. As he delivers blows to the enemies, he remembers that each floor has several challenges. The rats fall easily under the high-level sword blows of the player. To advance to the next floor, he must complete all the challenges, whether they are battles or tests. The player remembers that when he played online, the Infinite Tower had 50 floors in total, but he does not know how many floors there will be now. While deep in thought, a rat manages to surprise him and grabs him by the arm. Even though his equipment is low level, it is the best equipment he got with the coins, and these rats simply cannot overcome Shin's defense. He easily gets rid of the rat, but knows he must be more careful, because any wound could be fatal. The rat is thrown far away, but as it hits the ground, it makes a noise attracting other creatures. The warrior was focused on seeing his enemy fall to the ground, but manages to spot something in the darkness of the cave. Numerous red dots that look like eyes begin to appear from the darkness, near where his enemy had fallen. A system message alerts that he has enraged a pack of giant rats. The player seems incredulous, seeing that right on the first floor, a pack of rats would attack him. This would not be too much for him. With his sword in hand but a little hesitant, he prepares to face this pack of rats. The huge number of giant rats in front of him makes the player a bit scared, especially since the monsters are enraged. From inside the cave with glittering crystals, we can still hear the sounds of the rats. They are still fighting, and we can hear the sound of flesh being cut and blood dripping. Repeatedly, the blood spurts and hits the ground. We can see that the fight continues, and the warrior can easily cut his opponents. All the rats have a red glow in their eyes, indicating they are about to attack again. But with a serious and even malicious expression, our warrior slices his enemy in half. One of the giant rats, seeing its companion defeated in this manner, trembles for its life. The rat shakes with fear but remains motionless to avoid being seen. The animal can see its defeated companions, and the warrior notices he has leveled up again. As he turns to the rat, his expression causes great fear, making all the rats flee, leaving the warrior astonished. This behavior of the rats was not common in the online game he played. Maybe they are more realistic now that the game has been brought into Shin's reality. Shin swings his sword as if to cut through the air to clean the blood off it and completes the challenge of the first floor of the tower. The second floor is outside the cave in a forest full of very tall trees, and a mist spreads through the area. Our hero moves so quickly that his enemies can hardly follow his movements. The perception of the lizard men is very slow. When they sense danger, it is already too late. With his speed and attack strength, he can deliver very fast blows, taking down 3 at once. The lizard men scream in pain, but our hero cuts through them with ease, needing only 1 strike for each. Shin notices that the sensation of running in the field feels very real, and he also looks at his sword, a very powerful sword. The Koyam sword increases the user's agility, making it great for surprise attacks. While distracted by the beauty of his sword, the warrior does not notice a lizard man attacking from behind. But with his incredibly high attack power, especially compared to weak opponents like these, the lizard men's swords and armor are no match for such a high-level item that can only be used because of the rainbow sticker. One member of the large group of lizards tries to hit Shin with his sword, but the blow was easily parried. Although the lizard men are much stronger than other monsters of the same level, their strength is little compared to the attack level of the Koyam sword, which can easily cut through anything, even weapons that grant high attack power to the monsters. Especially these lizards, who have high attack power but low defense, making the hero's attacks cause a lot of damage. The high attack power of these lizards makes it difficult for players without armor to pass through. Since our player is fully equipped, he decides to hunt more lizards in this area. He manages to find and eliminate some with relative ease due to his high-level equipment. The challenge of the third floor is in an open forest area with a blue sun. With a blue glow enveloping his body, the player is teleported to the ground near the trees. He feels relieved to finally touch his feet to the ground of the third floor. Due to his vast knowledge, he remembers that on this floor there is a hidden dungeon with great treasure inside. The warrior begins to search for the hidden dungeon. Since Shin started the game late, he hopes no one has found this dungeon yet. The player recalls the first time he found this dungeon in the game when he was still playing on his computer at home. He remembers that when he had just created his account to play, he met a group of high-level players. These players were much stronger and more experienced, so a strong group could easily carry the novice boy to high-level areas. Shin was very happy to have found this group, especially since he was just starting the game. He did not suspect that they could be treacherous. Suddenly, his character is expelled from the group, and the boy is surprised by this. Immediately after, he notices a sword piercing his character's chest from the direction of his companions. Just one attack almost depleted the vigor of Shin's old character. He is caught off guard because the players took him far away just to try to steal from his character. With a mocking laugh, the treacherous players ask if the novice boy is naive or just plain foolish. By accepting help from strangers, Shin became easy prey to be robbed. Shin could not understand why those players acted so maliciously. Since his character was very weak and had nothing of value, the players only wanted to make life difficult for novices. With great luck and very little life left, the novice player manages to escape, leaving the group of bandits behind. In the midst of the run, Shin, with great luck, spots the entrance to a cave among the bushes. The boy nostalgically remembers this experience because it was after this that he started spending money on the game. Perhaps he should even thank those players. The search for the cave continues, and Shin walks through the illuminated forest. Until during his walk, the warrior finds a crevice in a rock and he is sure the entrance was there. But as he gets closer to the crevice, he sees that it is closed and not the entrance to the dungeon. Could another player have found it? And that is why it disappeared. These are Shin's thoughts as he investigates the place. With a sad and tired look from so much searching, the warrior thinks that perhaps it was just a waste of time. Disappointed but with no other options, the hero begins to return the way he came. But he steps on a mound of soft grass that gives way under his feet. To his surprise, he finds himself in a large hole and is astonished to encounter a trap in such a place in the middle of nowhere. The depth of the fall leaves our hero very scared. While falling into the deep abyss, he lets out a scream with all his strength, and only stops screaming when he hits the bottom of this abyss with a loud thud. Still incredulous about falling into a trap in such an inhospitable place, the fall certainly injures our hero. Despite being injured, the warrior feels a surge of excitement and quickly gets up with the possibility of having found the secret dungeon. A game message reveals this to be true. He has found the secret dungeon, the laboratory of a powerful alchemist. This was not the secret dungeon he expected. A healing potion is enough to get rid of all the injuries from the fall, easy to take since the potion tastes like strawberry. Given the height of the fall, our hero could have died. His vigor points were slightly lower. After better understanding the situation, the player realizes that it was not a trap but an entrance camouflaged by branches and leaves. These are signs that probably a human passed by and left these branches to prevent others from finding the dungeon. Shin knows someone has already found this dungeon, but since it hasn't disappeared, there may still be rewards inside. Before entering the dungeon, he takes a shining stone from his inventory. This stone illuminates the darkness of the cave and is one of the items Shin bought from the premium store. Its effect is simple. When thrown on the ground, the stone begins to emit a faint light. With a voice command from the hero, it activates a strong light and begins to follow him. The strong light illuminates the warrior's face, and Shin only hopes no one else is in the dungeon. Another player could harm him, and now his life is at risk. After all, whenever two players compete for a large treasure, the fight is bloody. With the light guiding his way and the sword in hand, the warrior proceeds to enter the dungeon, passing through large metal doors. With large and quick strides, Shin is trying to escape a difficult situation right at the beginning of the dungeon. Several monsters were already at the dungeon entrance, waiting for him. With his life in danger, the best option is to flee. It seems there is no other escape but to use the attribute points he was saving. With a voice command, the status screen opens. Using these points now is not bad because when he finishes the dungeon, he will likely be at level 50. His attack is already high, and what he needs is speed to escape the monsters. Shin puts all the points into increasing his agility, which makes him run at superhuman speed. He runs so fast that he cannot stop running as if there is no tomorrow. The problem is that at the end of the corridor, there is a wall waiting. With the increased agility points, his physical abilities also improved, and he manages to do a somersault using the wall for momentum. He did not expect that investing so many points in agility would make it difficult even to control the movement of his legs. But at least he can rest a bit and catch his breath from the run. The boy, who was leaning on his sword, lifts it off the ground to test his new reflexes. He starts with a horizontal cut to feel the movement of his arms. He assumes a fencing position as if to practice some small strikes. The speed with which he can deliver blows and perform cutting maneuvers to make them even faster is fascinating. This leaves Shin very intrigued by how the status and attribute system works. He continues practicing some movements on the wall, making very quick cuts in various directions on the wall, when suddenly something catches his attention coming from the end of the corridor. The warrior thought he had lost the enemies, but they were still nearby. But now that he is a little more accustomed to the new speed, he advances towards the enemy with small jumps. The enemy is a chimera, a combination of various monster parts stitched together using magical surgeries. The best way to deal with this monster is to make quick decisions and use precise strikes. Very quickly, the boy charges at the monster. With a somersault, he spins with his sword, cutting off both of the chimera's arms. This acrobatic move certainly made the combat easier. Feeling its flesh being cut, the chimera emits a roar of pain. The tactic of using high attack power and speed gives the hero a significant advantage. He just needs to be careful not to get hit. For the decisive blow, a lot of strength is required, and the ground itself crumbles as he prepares to leap. The leap is huge, heading towards the enemy with all his might. The warrior can already see victory and shouts as he delivers his final blow. A flash of light forms and various debris flies with the impact of the attacks. This force was produced by the warrior's body as he flew towards the wall, defending against the monster's attack at the last moment. The chimera is very cunning and possesses all the abilities of the creatures that compose it. Even Shin can't understand what kind of creature has arms that long. The creature's fist closes to continue its strikes. The monster delivers several punches with its elastic arm. The strikes are very fast and are barely evaded. There is no way to defeat the monster just by dodging its attacks. The hero also needs to attack. Parrying the blows with his sword and trying to hit the monster whenever possible, the fight happens very quickly. The sword cannot penetrate the enemy's arm. It seems to be made of rubber. This leaves Shin extremely surprised. The monsters in the dungeon usually have a very high level and are meant to be hunted in groups. Shin knows that there are other monsters also after him, and he cannot take long to finish this fight. With great speed, the boy manages to defend himself from all the chimera's blows and prepares a counterattack, but fails to advance to strike it. And when least expected, he remembers a technique he had learned earlier. Another attack from the chimera quickly comes to hit him and manages to land a strong impact that pierces his armor and his chest. But what seemed to be the warrior's body is actually an illusion used to distract, and he is above the monster. As he invested many skill points, Shin can perform this kind of ability which requires incredible speed. With a precise blow and a look of relief, he finally cuts off the chimera's last arm. The arm falls to the ground and writhes while gushing blood. Defeated, the chimera falls to the ground without any of its arms, and our hero faces it, ready to deliver the coup de grace. It cannot attack and shouldn't have any more surprise attacks, says Shin. But the chimera also has a high regeneration power, and a new arm appears where the old one was. This takes the boy by surprise, who doesn't know how to react. This arm is even bigger than the previous one. He tries to run to strike and end the monster's life, but the arm is much larger than his body, allowing the chimera to deliver a blow and crush him with ease. The monster shows a look of relief. The fight was finally over. But when it removes its hand, it realizes that where the hero's body should be, there is nothing. Confused, the monster cannot understand what is happening. Shin was moving to the ceiling to gain a vantage point over the monster. What had received the monster's blow was just another illusion created due to his high speed. With an extremely strong strike, the boy cuts the chimera from bottom to top. The force of the attack is such that even the floor is marked, and the place where the warrior landed was a huge crater, while the monster remains motionless. Cut in half, there is no way it can start regenerating anymore. Some messages begin to appear in front of the hero, informing him that he has leveled up, and as he reached level 50, he can equip accessories. Inside the dungeon, he accesses his inventory to find some accessories he can equip. As he cannot decide which accessory has the best enchantment, he checks his options. The rings that increase all attributes by 5 points, the necklace that grants more defense and agility, or the bracelet with increased strength. When he realizes a monstrous little dog is approaching him wanting to play, there is no time for games. Shin sets off to attack to catch the monster. This dog reveals the size of its jaw. It didn't want to play at all, just to attack the hero. The sound of the battle against the remaining monsters can be heard from afar. The fight continues until all the monsters inside the dungeon are defeated. Tired and wounded, what was needed to proceed with the journey were some healing potions. It's good to rest a bit since all the monsters have already been defeated, but Shin wants to check something else. A wall that seemed quite different. When he looked behind it, it seemed that there was a person there. Could it be a player or some kind of NPC? The person behind the wall who seemed hidden was a player and could have been the player who had already discovered this dungeon before Shin. The boy does not understand why another player is trapped in a place like that. It would be difficult to help her without understanding the whole situation. He starts looking in his inventory, hoping to find something that could help. Luckily, he has an item from the premium store, a scroll that allows him to see the other player's status. This was one of the items bought with real money, which now will prove very useful. By casting the spell, Shin can access all the character's information and attributes. The player's name is Kim Hyein, and she is level 37. One of her skills is being able to discover dungeons and labyrinths upon seeing the situation the character was in and by her name. Shin believes she is also Korean. What catches his attention the most is her ability to find dungeons and labyrinths that have an S rank above normal. The player remembers that the highest rank he had seen was rank E. He had never heard of rank S before, and knowing that rank E was already very effective, he imagines that rank S must be much better. This ability to find various dungeons would allow him to find low-difficulty dungeons with great rewards. This is everything Shin wanted. The girl also didn't seem to have any combat skills. While the boy wonders whether or not to free her, a small murmur is heard and the player's eyes begin to open slowly. Noticing this, Shin calls out to her, asking if she can hear him and if she is already awake. The player wakes up very frightened, and her first reaction is to scream, "Who are you?" Shin places the blade of his sword threateningly in front of the player's face. This move leaves her very scared. But the boy wants to help and asks her to calm down and not make noise since they are inside a hole in the wall. It's best to avoid having the monsters come all at once. The girl, still in shock with a trembling voice, asks for forgiveness and apologizes for anything she might have done. The boy tries to calm her down by saying that he found her by coincidence while trying to clear the dungeon. A little suspicious, she asks how Shin found her behind the stone wall. He says that the details are not important and continues looking for something on the wall, focusing repeatedly thrusting his sword into the wall as if he were looking for some kind of passage or something secret, but he finds nothing. The girl asks if he can release her and what he was looking for on the wall. The warrior was searching for some kind of secret lever. Very common in places like this, he questions if the girl hadn't seen any lever. She says the place was created by another player and was not part of the dungeon. That player could summon spirits to help her and created a stone wall by waving her staff with magic. Due to his vast knowledge of the game, Shin imagines that she must have used an earth spirit and asks why the player imprisoned the girl there. Kim responds that the ones who imprisoned her were the players who wanted to keep all the rewards without sharing. They were 3 men. Shin thinks a bit about what is happening and begins to understand the situation. Since the player has no combat skills, only exploration skills, she probably sold maps and the locations of secret dungeons, until she was lured by some unscrupulous players who wanted to do her harm. After all, the Tower of Infinity is a place where the law of the strongest prevails. As she is still alive, it is assumed that she would probably be sold as a slave or for more explorations. Shin thinks about how good the exploration skill is. Kim would be a great ally, and maybe finding her was a work of fate. He puts his hand on her shoulder to try to make her calmer and more cheerful. Making a great effort, he tries to give a big smile like in a margarine commercial, telling her that everything will be fine. This sudden change in mood makes the girl even more suspicious, but as her options are limited, she accepts and asks again for Shin to release her. While freeing the player, Shin says that to show her gratitude, she could help him in the dungeon. The girl says she has a unique skill. The skill was already known to Shin, who allied with Kim to enjoy this benefit. She starts to suspect how he knew all her information. He tells her not to worry, that he is helping her because they are both Koreans. As they leave the hole, Kim formally introduces herself and says she makes a living selling maps to find dungeons. The boy asks if she had trouble with some unscrupulous players. The answer is yes, and she points to a hidden path behind the wall. With his high speed, Shin opens the way with very quick strikes. She continues telling that after discovering the dungeon, those 3 men attacked her, with the secret path opened by the quick strikes. The warrior then asks where those men are now after leaving her locked up, and Kim responds that they went back to regroup and come up with a better strategy to clear the dungeon. The boy questions if it was them who placed those monsters at the beginning of the dungeon, but Kim explains that when the clock strikes midnight, the chimeras stay still for 2 hours. Although this is new information, Shin remains calm because he didn't know this kind of thing happened in the game. They continue walking while Kim explains that the criminals will return in a few days to finish the dungeon. Being unconscious and trapped, she doesn't know how much time has passed. Shin proposes that since she knows the way, she should lead while they finish collecting all the remaining treasures in the dungeon. Shin asks Kim to go ahead since in this realistic game mode he is still a novice. As soon as the player passes in front of him, Shin notices a strong burst of light coming from the corridor that is about to hit her. He swiftly pulls her out of the way and a spell brushes very close to Kim's face, but hits the wall behind them, causing a massive explosion and leaving the player very scared as she almost got seriously injured. 3 figures appear at the end of the tunnel. These figures mock how the player managed to escape and can see that Shin is a novice. Shin positions himself further ahead to defend against the attacks of these assassins. His composure skill allows him to stay calm in a life-or-death situation like this. It is the first time he faces other players in combat. By controlling his breathing to be slow, he manages to stay calm and have more clarity of the situation. One of the men tells him not to try to play the hero and that if he leaves all of his equipment on the ground and surrenders, they will let him go. Shin takes a battle stance because he knows the enemy's equipment is not very high and that there will be no difficulty. It seems there is no talking to the assassins. They say they prefer to kill the girl and Shin. Suddenly, the mage increases his friend's movement speed. The girl says she can help him in the fight, but Shin tells her to stay hidden as she could interfere. One of the villains starts to advance alone towards Shin, and the other 2 bandits tell their colleague to stay calm and not kill the girl. Kim hopes that the player can manage because he is strong and she will support him from afar while hiding in the hole that was her prison. With increased speed, the evil assassin activates his charge ability and moves extremely fast towards the confrontation. Shin knows he can't hesitate. Even though it's not a monster, a real player must attack with full force. His enemy reaches him very quickly and attacks. The player also strikes with all his strength towards the opponent and their swords meet. The force of the players' swords clashing is so great that the noise produced is very loud and the ground at their feet begins to crumble. The evil warrior is frightened by the power he sees in front of him. Despite the boy who faces him seeming fragile, he is as hard as a brick wall. Shin remains calm during the duel because he knows these players are only on the 3rd level, thinking they are bigger and better than they are. The opponents only seem strong and there was no reason to prolong this duel. Shin's blade is of much higher quality, managing to break the sword in half. The rest of the strike continues with devastating force, hitting the opponent in the neck. The cut happens so quickly and efficiently that the evil warrior didn't even realize what had happened. His sword was already broken, and his head was completely removed with just one blow from Shin. Kim is extremely surprised to see such a high combat skill, which also impresses the evil warrior's companions. They are shocked, incredulous, and scared of what lies ahead. The body of Taewon, the evil warrior, falls to the ground with just a simple blow, and Shin proceeds with his battle composure towards the other two. The evil players check the status screen to see if their friend is really dead, and a skull is over his name. Desperate, the mage casts a spell and tells his archer friend to keep attacking if the two of them don't want to die there. The spell quickly hits Shin, who tries to move but can't. This is an earth spell that locks the opponent in place. It is cast instantly and doesn't need any symbol or casting time. Taking advantage of the fact that the boy is trapped on the ground by his friend's spell, the archer releases a powerful arrow to end the boy's life. The spell continues to climb up his legs despite trying to pull his foot out with all his might. With a very quick defensive move, Shin manages to dodge the arrow and catch it in his hand. While the mage's staff glows, indicating he is about to cast a powerful spell, the archer activates his triple shot ability, and 3 arrows fly straight towards the target. Due to his high investment in agility points, Shin can see the arrows flying towards him. The increase in the attribute also affected his perception. Now he moves faster and can see the arrows clearly. One by one, the arrows fall, some parried by his hand, others with the help of his sword. Shin's serious expression instills fear in his enemies. This situation is unusual for the archer. He has never seen a player with such high agility who could catch and defend against all his shots. The mage is concentrating to cast a large spell, but he needs a little more time and asks the archer to prevent the enemy from advancing. Desperate, the archer pulls a special arrow from his quiver that he had kept for a long time since they are quite expensive. Very calmly, Shin tries to identify what type of arrow it is or if it is some magic or a kind of magical arrow. This special arrow triggers the Storm Shot ability, which causes thousands of projectiles to fall in the area below where it was launched. The projectiles hit the ground so violently that they raise a lot of dust, pushing and scaring Kim. After the dust settles, the archer tries to check if the attack hit the two players as it seemed and if they were dead. Confident that Shin and Kim are dead, the archer lets out an evil laugh, mocking the lack of agility to dodge the blow. Having won the duel and avenged his fallen comrade, the archer celebrates and imagines he will be able to sell all the equipment there. The girl is still very scared by the strength of the used ability and also believes that the hero is dead. The archer turns to his mage companion, joking about his magical abilities, saying it took too long and they didn't have that time in combat. The mage is still a bit incredulous about what happened, but his eyes notice something happening in the middle of the smoke. What is that? The mage says. What do you mean? The archer responds with another question, and a blue glow starts to emerge from the middle of the smoke. The silhouette of the hero appears in the middle of the smoke and the stone illuminating his path above. Both are coming towards the two assassins. With a slight cough from all the dust, Shin is unimpressed with what he sees and was not hit at all. With teeth chattering in fear and incredulous at what he sees, the archer cannot believe the warrior could have dodged the Storm Shot ability. Kim is radiant to see that the hero is still walking and shouts his name to try to cheer him on in the battle. The Storm Shot ability is a very strong ability used only by high-level archers. Shin already knew it and managed to dodge it by knowing the distance of the projectiles. The boy plants his feet on the ground and prepares to start running towards the opponent, ending this fight quickly. When the archer turns desperately to ask for help from his colleague, something surprising happens. A stone wall appears right behind the archer very quickly, closing off the entire path. The mage betrayed his groupmate and created a wall to block the way so that everyone there could not pass and pursue. It's Shin now who mocks his opponents. He sees that the archer understands the situation he is in very well, just doesn't have the skills to defend himself. When he finishes speaking, Shin charges with such speed that you can't even see his trail. The archer begs for mercy, asking to be spared, but the time for negotiations has passed since the evil brute did not agree to let them go. With a mercy strike, the adventure of another evil player ends. With long strides, the last assassin player is already preparing his escape route, especially after seeing the strongest player fall with just one blow. A thought is constantly hammering in his head. How is such a strong player still on the 3rd floor of the tower? The only hope for this mage is to get out of the dungeon to warn his guildmates, returning the whole guild to defeat Shin. But the escape progress is suddenly interrupted by a blow to the head, as glass is flying far away and the mage losing his balance. He can't believe Shin has already caught up with him. The blow was defended by some kind of magical barrier. A mage in robes with no armor wouldn't survive the attack. This barrier must be from some magical equipment. The warrior stands in front of his opponent who knows it's impossible to face such a strong adversary. As a last resort, the mage asks for some calm since he also follows good customs and a few words could resolve all this peacefully. Shin repeats what the mage said at the beginning of the fight, that there was no reason to talk. To try to create a reason, the mage reveals that he is from the Golden Lions Guild. Being very strong, Shin will attract the leader's attention, and his death could incite some revenge. The boy agrees with him, which makes the mage relieved. But Shin keeps walking and breaks the glasses on the ground, questioning how the mage's guild would know who he was to execute their revenge. Not exactly understanding what the warrior meant, the mage asks him to explain again with an extremely nervous smile. With a chilling laugh and an expression that sends shivers down the spine, Shin says there are no witnesses here. The mage realizes there is no other alternative. Only by fighting will he survive. In a last desperate attempt, he says that the guild leader is coming and that when he arrives, there will be no need to keep fighting. Or will there be? After that, the boy pretends that his boss is behind the protagonist and he, in turn, looks back to check. Then the mage takes advantage of the opportunity to attack him off guard. Using the stone hammer ability, with hatred, the young man continues hammering the rock against the ground. But Shin appears behind him, saying that the protection ring blocks a single hit, being useful for classes with low maximum health. Seeing that, the mage is startled and activates his stone barrier ability. However, the boy knows that a barrier like that will not stop his sword. Right after, he easily cuts through the shield, thinking about how, in the end, he ended up killing 3 people, and that he was already aware that he would have blood on his hands sooner or later. The girl observes the situation and is astonished to see that the protagonist managed to defeat those 3 in an instant, because they weren't just players but famous assassins, and even so, Shin made it look easy. After that, she notices that the young man's equipment wasn't old at all because he managed to cut through flesh with a single strike, and then wonders how he is still at the lower levels. Right after, she thinks she's very lucky because she thought it would have been better if she were dead, but after meeting someone so strong and kind, she starts to see it as a miracle. The girl approaches the protagonist, saying that he was amazing and that taking down guild members so easily is no small feat, to which he responds that he doesn't think it was anything special. Shin asks if there were more people with those 3, and the girl says that it was just them, but they might have contacted the guild for reinforcements. After that, the young man says that he highly doubts they told their superiors about that dungeon because they wanted to keep all the items for themselves. The girl starts thinking about how good it would be to form a party with him, and that she definitely wouldn't refuse if he invited her to his group. Right after, the boy hands over the lackey's items to the girl so she can sell them and says that it will serve as compensation for what they did to her. However, the girl comments that she should be the one paying him back for saving her. Shin then says that if she wants to repay him, she can help him find some dungeons, while thinking that he cannot help but be generous to someone with a rare skill. The girl, in turn, decides to accept the invitation. Then the girl tells him that if he follows that direction, he will find the boss room, but she couldn't get there because of the chimeras, and the young man replies that he can handle them. The boy is impressed that the girl managed to find the boss room. The girl decides to try to act correctly from now on. After that, the duo arrives in front of the boss room. Shin asks what kind of boss is inside, but the girl says that even with her ability, she cannot get any information about the room. Then the protagonist says that they will have to find out for themselves. Upon opening the door, they find themselves in a huge hall, and the system informs them that the ancient alchemist who sought to become a Death Knight has just awakened from his slumber. The protagonist finds that information strange because if it is true, the game is broken since the Death Knight is above level 200. Right after, a skeleton sitting at the end of the hall laughs and says that it has been a long time since he has seen a living person in that place. That supposed level 68 Death Knight. The boy breathes a sigh of relief as he realizes he can easily handle that obstacle. Then he tells the girl to wait for him outside while he deals with the boss. The Death Knight was someone who lived a noble life, and after his death, he was resurrected, becoming a terror. As he walks, the young man thinks that since the boss was an alchemist in life, it's only natural that he is incomplete. The skeleton asks how a mortal dares to approach a Death Knight without feeling a shred of fear. Shin comments that he is quite arrogant for someone so weak and says they will see if he can maintain his reputation. The boss, in turn, warns the young man that if he keeps walking towards him, there will be no turning back. However, the protagonist tells him to cut the nonsense and fight already. The Death Knight gets angry and asks how a human dares to speak to him that way. Right after, the boy finds an opening and decides to attack. However, the boss dodges easily. Shin is surprised to see that the opponent managed to evade his attack even though he aimed at an unprotected spot. But he doesn't give up and decides to attack again, and the skeleton dodges once more. Seeing that, the protagonist finds it strange because the knight is slower than him, yet he keeps evading. Then he decides to keep trying to hit him, but the attempts still don't succeed. After a series of attempts, the young man questions whether that was some kind of special ability. The boss, in turn, asks if the boy really believes that such weak cuts would work on him. Shin then thinks that it might be an ability related to precognition, and wonders how he will crush that annoying skeleton's skull. After that, the knight reveals that he can see through the young man's attacks and says that if he leaves at that moment, he will spare his life. However, Shin responds that he won't back down because he is finally understanding the opponent's ability and then decides to keep advancing. The boss, in turn, activates his poison potion barrage. Right after, the protagonist thinks about how he finally believes he has figured out the ability, and is surprised to see that the poison can melt the ground. After that, he questions why an alchemist capable of doing that kind of thing tried to become a Death Knight when he would have been stronger if he had focused on just one path. The boss states that even a powerful warrior is killed by that poison because it disperses through the air. Then the system informs that the young man has been affected by a status effect caused by poisoning. The boss then reveals that his weapon has defeated several enemies even when he was still alive. Shin decides to use his inventory and grabs a potion that removes all status effects below level 100. The boy begins drinking it, and the knight says that there's no way an antidote can cure his poison. After drinking the potion, the protagonist explains that it is something created by the game developers and cannot be found in the real world. Upon learning that the status effects have been removed, the boy vanishes from the opponent's sight, stating that he will end the battle quickly. The skeleton becomes confused and wonders if the young man has discovered the weakness of his abilities. Right after, Shin appears behind the boss, stabbing his sword into his skull and explaining that warning-type abilities do not activate if he cannot see the attack. Then the protagonist finishes off the Death Knight. Thus, he levels up several times and receives the rare title of Hidden Dungeon Attacker, and discovers that he can now summon the boss whenever he wants. Upon learning that, the boy comments that it was a great loot for a hidden dungeon boss. After that, the girl enters the room, wondering how her companion managed to defeat the boss, and he, in turn, responds that it was very easy. However, he says that the most important thing is that the portal is open, so they should hurry and leave to rest for a while. But before leaving, he suggests that they add each other as friends and says that he believes they met there because of fate. The system has a functional chat feature that serves as a substitute for phones in the Tower of Infinity, where electronics do not exist. Shin then thinks that there is no need to feel sad because if he receives a message from the girl saying she found a dungeon, he will go immediately. At the end, the young man observes the items he obtained in the last adventure and wonders why an incomplete Death Knight like that has such items when they should be with a lich. Right after, he says that if he is not mistaken, he can summon the boss using that flask, and then decides to use it carefully. After that, the system announces that the Death Knight has become the young man's growth-type pet. That type of pet can fulfill the roles of more than one party member. And in addition, they have no time limit on how long they can remain summoned. Then the boy kicks the skeleton off his bed. Shin asks if the knight remembers anything from the dungeon. The boss then recalls that the young man managed to kill him, and believes that he has become a true Death Knight, deciding to show the protagonist his true power. The boy realizes that, apparently, the monster's eccentric personality remains intact and orders him to sit down. And since he is a pet, the skeleton is forced to obey the order, otherwise he would be erased for disobedience. After that, the young man asks if the monster has anything to say. The monster, in turn, apologizes for being arrogant in the dungeon, and confesses that he was a bit of a coward, so he acted that way to hide his weakness. Right after, he reveals that he tried to scare the young man after discovering that he had defeated all of his chimeras. Shin decides to check the pet's status because it's ridiculous for a Death Knight who relies on close combat to be a complete coward. Upon looking at the stats, he says that everything is as expected. However, the protagonist remembers that he has an item in his inventory to increase the pet's level. The potion was a reward from a limited time event, while the Blessing of the Dead is an extremely rare and effective item. The skeleton comments that he doesn't like the aura those items are emitting. Shin, in turn, asks if he knows how valuable they are, and the knight questions whether it is a cursed item, but the protagonist hands it to him anyway and says that he would never give something harmful to his pet. Then the creature decides to drink the potion, raising its level to 100, and the skeleton comments that he can feel himself getting stronger. Right after, the protagonist decides to use the rare item on the monster as well. A great light illuminates the entire room. Now with a different appearance, the Death Knight tells his master that his true potential has been unlocked. Shin discovers that his pet now has the corpse explosion ability, which is very good but seems to be steering him away from being a Death Knight. The skeleton, in turn, is very satisfied with his evolution, and the boy thinks that now that his monster is useful, it might be time to move on to the next floor. At a camp near the entrance to the 5th floor of the Tower of Infinity, many players are stuck there, unable to ascend to the next floor, and some people are searching for a tank. The young man thinks about how they only want that class because of a specialty of the 5th floor, and that the boss of that stage is a challenge that can be considered a wall of tears for players below level 100. After that, he thinks to himself that the 5th floor boss requires a party of 4 members, and that besides that, it would be a good chance to observe the abilities of regular players because it makes the difference between the game and reality apparent. In that place, it is very challenging to find a reliable tank as it is a role widely considered noble. Healers are precious in the game, while long-range attackers like mages and archers are safer than tanks. Nearby, a group is sitting, worried about not being able to find a tank. The protagonist approaches because he heard that those people would leave as soon as they had a tank. A guy in the group gets excited, thinking that the boy is the class they were looking for, and tries to convince him by saying that they would repay him with a comfortable trip to the boss room. However, Shin confesses that he is not a tank. Then the group turns away, telling him to leave. But the young man asks them to wait because even though he isn't a tank, he can still play the role of one. After that, the boy uses a spell. The guy in the group gets scared and wonders if it's an attack. However, the Death Knight is summoned. The girl comments that she has never heard of a summon being a tank, but its size appears to be suitable. The protagonist explains that the pet's defense is high and unlike humans, it doesn't feel pain, so it can take hits. Then he tells them that if it's in danger, he can simply recall it and summon it again. The girl says that from what she has seen, the plan seems good, but her companion is hesitant about using a pet as a tank, and the girl, in turn, comments that if the owner deals damage, it will be the same as having the power of 5 people. Shin tells the guy not to worry because the skeleton's attack and defense power are higher than that of a warrior of the same level. A teammate of the guy slaps him on the head, telling him to stop interrogating. Right after, the girl introduces herself as Soyeon and says that her specialty is giving buffs and temporarily resurrecting someone with a shield. The group leader says his name is Hyunsu, and his magic is fire-based. After that, the third member introduces himself as Hyun-woo, the group's archer. The protagonist also states his name to the group and says that he is a melee DPS. Then the mage says that they should head to the gate right away. And then the group walks to the 5th floor. Hyunsu asks if the protagonist has ever tried to challenge that floor, and he responds that he hasn't, but he is already quite familiar with the strategy. The leader says that if either his or the tank's abilities turn out to be pathetic, they should immediately leave the group. Shin questions why they still doubt his abilities so much. The Death Knight asks if his master was really expecting him to be a tank. After that, the boy explains that the skeleton is the same level as the boss on that floor and that he is invincible with that armor. Shin asks what the pet's best weapon is, and he responds that all of them are, but the best is the sword. And then the monster receives a weapon, and the boy says that his stats are overwhelming, so he just needs to go all out. Right after, the protagonist explains that the sword has a medium attack power with a chance to cause bleeding. Cyan asks if the boy is rich because that weapon is legendary grade and very expensive, and he, in turn, explains that he knows a popular ranker who helped him a little, although he was told to keep his secret. After that, the mage tells his companions to stop the small talk because the patrol was already approaching, and then he orders the protagonist to use his pet to take care of them. Shin gives the order for the skeleton to attack. The knight charges toward the monsters and slashes the creatures using his new sword. Hyunsu assists using his fire magic, commenting that his companion's pet is more suitable as a DPS than a tank because its attack power is no joke. The Death Knight starts to feel confident and asks his teammates to leave the small fries to him. Seeing that, Shin thinks about how his monster is performing better than expected, and that it would be great if he didn't make any unnecessary movements. However, more troops appear to fight the group. Hyunwoo says that each of them should take on one enemy so they can quickly reduce their numbers. Then he tells the mage to take the ones on the left while he deals with the ones on the right. And so the group begins handling the monsters, with the skeleton eliminating them easily. After defeating all the weak enemies, they can finally go to the boss room they have been waiting for. And then they encounter the boss of the 5th floor, a troll who is currently sleeping. The protagonist thinks that this might be a common creature in other games, but here it's different. That monster is known as the Terror of Low Levels, being very violent and agile, which is why a tank is needed to hold him. And although he is relatively weak against fire, that isn't really unique to just this monster. But the Death Knight, still confident after defeating the subordinates, says that he believes he can solo him too. However, his master tells him not to attack without coming up with a plan. With all that noise, a monster ends up waking up. And so the battle against the 5th floor dungeon boss begins. The mage asks if they should retreat and reset the boss until the tank recovers, and Shin responds that there is no need because his pet is good. Right after, the skeleton, still full of confidence, says that he will handle that opponent. However, when trying to attack, the knight feels an immense pressure and realizes that if he gets hit, he will die. After that, the troll attempts to strike his opponent, but he notices that his attack didn't hit the skeleton and wonders where he went. The pet hides behind his master and comments that they need to change their strategy, and that there is no shame in running away when facing a stronger enemy. However, the protagonist throws his servant away and says that with that equipment, he won't die so easily. Then he orders the knight not to retreat. Returning to the fight, the troll questions where the monster was hiding. Right after, he tries to attack the skeleton, but he manages to dodge. Afraid, the creature asks for calm and suggests that they talk a little. However, the troll isn't interested in the proposal and continues his attacks. Shin apologizes for his pet, saying that he's a bit of a coward despite his abilities, and that despite his personality, his skills are decent. Cyan comments that the tank was acting as if he could read the boss's attacks. The Death Knight has an S-rank survival instinct, but is afraid of a 5th floor boss, and if it weren't for that cowardly personality, he would definitely be capable of much more. After that, the skeleton manages to land a hit on the troll but doesn't put much force into it. The protagonist thinks that it might take longer than expected for his subordinate to draw aggro. Then the boss gets hit by a fireball, and the group decides to attack him as well. However, Shin tries to stop them, saying that it was still too early. Hyunsu, in turn, says that he is sure it's fine because of the 5-minute aggro rule. The boy starts thinking about how stupid that is since strategy should be flexible depending on the party composition. After that, the boss gets an arrow to the eye. Hyunwoo says he landed a critical hit and that even though the troll has great regenerative power, his eyes regenerate slowly. The troll pulls out the arrow and says he will not forgive the human who did that. Right after, Shin tells them to get out of there because they lost the tank's aggro. So-yeon activates a shield to protect her friend. However, even with that, the boss manages to break through the defense and hit the archer. The boss keeps advancing, saying that he will kill him. Hyunwoo comments that his health dropped by half with just one hit. But before he can be hit again, the girl starts using her healing magic. The mage suggests that they retreat for now and try again later. After that, the troll decides to focus on the girl. However, she is saved by the protagonist, and her companions begin praising him. Shin orders his pet to protect the healer and says that they have come this far, so they can't just restart the fight. The girl questions what the young man is doing because the best thing they should do is retreat and regroup. However, the boy comments that the boss regenerates too fast. Right after, he decides to go head-to-head with a monster. The boy then tells the opponent not to just stand there and attack him already. And then a series of attacks begins from both sides. Shin starts thinking about how this is easier than he expected. The other members begin wondering if their companion is a tank. The troll gets irritated and says that this human is in his way, and the young man asks if he is not worthy of being the beast's opponent. The boss then says he will take care of the weaker ones first. Shin is surprised to see that the boss jumped over his head, and the knight starts getting nervous about what he should do. The creature shows no mercy and says he wants the girl. Hyunsu says that if the healer falls, it will all die. A voice comes from behind the boss saying that he made a mistake by turning his back on his opponent, and then the boss's head is cut off and rolls to the ground. Everyone in the group is shocked by what they are seeing. The protagonist thinks that if a party wasn't required to enter that dungeon, he would have finished this a long time ago. Then the boy says that they have cleared the 5th floor and that he didn't expect it to be that easy. And with that, the young man levels up several times. After that, everyone in the group asks to add him as a friend. The mage comments that if they find another dungeon, they will definitely call him. After Shin leaves, the archer comments that it would have been better if they had stayed together as a party. Right after, the group decides to eat something before returning to the dungeon. On the 9th floor of Trials, a giant scorpion is causing chaos. However, the protagonist is fighting it, and then he slices the creature in half with his sword. Shin comments that he is feeling a bit overwhelmed because he advanced too quickly from the 5th to the 9th floor after leveling up. The system informs him that due to defeating the boss on that floor, the boy has obtained the rare title of Skilled Climber. And the young man in turn says that he remembers getting that title once when he was still an F2P player. The skeleton approaches, saying that he is very proud of his master, and he, in turn, thinks about how his pet always comes back even after being crushed. After that, the knight asks if they are going up to the 10th floor, and the young man replies that they are not because they need to go somewhere first. The protagonist wants to find a dungeon he was never able to meet the requirements for, no matter what he tried. And that if his guess is right, that place is probably the entrance to the next phase of the tutorial on Infernal difficulty. Two people stand in front of a portal and say that whoever enters is guaranteed rewards. When they try to enter, they receive a message stating that the requirements to enter the dungeon have not been met. A young man suggests that they should just give up already. His companion says that they could find good items in that place and asks if his friend wasn't at least a little excited. The guy responds that he was, but he points out that they had already been stuck on the 9th floor for a month and comments that even rankers would give up and move on. However, the man still refuses to give up and says that he is different and that his style is to keep trying until it works. Right after, the dude starts hearing the sound of people approaching, deciding to hide so they won't be found. And then they see the protagonist heading toward the portal along with his pet. The young man suggests that they wait and see what happens because maybe the boy has some way to enter, and he hopes that the young man has a chance to get into those ruins. After that, Shin manages to pass through the gate easily. The young man stands up indignantly, wondering how the boy managed to enter. And then they decide to run to the portal because it might still be open. But they are still blocked, receiving the system message again that they do not meet the necessary requirements. The young man questions how the protagonist obtained those supposed requirements. Then he says that they only have one option, which is to wait for the boy to return so they can rob him. Inside the portal, Shin says that everything seems to be in order. The knight in turn comments that the place looks quite promising because the place where he lived was also a dungeon. After that, they come across something resembling an altar. The system explains that the tutorial for Infernal difficulty is advancing to the next stage. Seeing that message, the protagonist says that they are in the right place. Right after, the area begins to shine with a strong light. Before the current players appeared, there was only one original player, the being who parted the seas and was worshipped by all. And the young man in turn questions the meaning of that story since he has never heard the term original player before. The system continues, saying that it was that player's power that protected the world from the invasion of ancient races, and that he also began to be worshipped as a divine figure. Shin starts wondering if this has anything to do with the name of the game. However, the invasion was not the only challenge humanity faced, so he decided to grant abilities to his followers. Eventually, the human forces that united around the original player were able to drive back the invasion of the demons and their followers. As he watches, the protagonist realizes that the story is completely different from what he knows about the game, and that these ruins seem to be related to the existence of the original player. After that, the system announces that the introduction is over, and that the test phase will begin soon. The boy is shocked to see the test starting so suddenly. Right after, the young man suddenly disappears, and finds himself in an entirely white space. Shin then wonders what this place is. The system announces that the test has begun and that the objective is to defeat the original player, and explains that his level has been adjusted to 1 and that if he does not complete the mission, the protagonist will fail the tutorial test for Infernal Medium difficulty. After that, the young man realizes that all of his titles and stats have disappeared and that even his equipment has returned to his inventory. Then he starts questioning where his pet is. He even tries to summon him, but nothing happens. Shin wonders if he will have to face alone a monster that annihilated other races and repelled the demons and their followers. And then he calms himself, thinking that since this world is based on the game, if it is a mission, there must be a way to complete it. After that, he hears a voice coming from behind him. It is the original player. A beautiful woman appears, saying that her successor has arrived. The young man thinks that even though she is wearing ordinary clothes, she still holds the title of having stopped the evil god. Right after, the protagonist asks what exactly original player and successor mean. The woman says that she cannot answer that question and that her role is only to determine whether he is qualified. Then she draws her sword, saying that the boy has only one thing to do, which is to defeat that body and achieve a glorious victory. Shin, in turn, comments that he would like to make the first move if his opponent is okay with it. The woman replies that she doesn't mind since, after all, both of them are at level 1 and there are few usable weapons. The boy then says that she will regret saying that, deciding to use an item from his inventory. The woman questions what that thing is. The young man explains that it is the Super Novice set, and that he will show her why it is the best ultimate level 1 equipment. His opponent comments that she is disappointed because it is surprising that someone who should be honing their strength relies on superficial items. The boy says that her observation is outdated since the number of people who have lost to him is in the hundreds. The woman in turn says that he is more arrogant than he looks and that she will teach him that depending on items is a fatal mistake. Right after, the protagonist decides to advance, saying that they will find out who is wrong as soon as the fight starts. But his opponent easily defends and says that he has no experience in fencing and that he is just attacking like a wild boar. However, before she can continue her speech, her weapon is split in half, leaving her completely shocked. Shin asks what happened to all of her confidence and moves forward to attack her again. However, she barely manages to dodge, deciding to step away from the young man. After that, the protagonist smiles and asks if she wants to repeat what she said about superficial items. The woman tosses what remains of her weapon aside and says that he is quite arrogant now that he has the advantage, admitting that she underestimated her opponent. Then she draws a new weapon and states that the real battle begins now, and that she will match the level of the boy's weapon to give him a proper challenge. The boy, in turn, asks if she isn't changing her attitude too quickly, since she is now relying on items as well. The girl gets irritated and tells him to stop asking questions. The system notifies that Shin is being affected by the fear status. He wonders if that is an ability used by bosses. Right after, a woman moves behind the protagonist and says that he is quite brave, and that if he doesn't block her next attack, he might end up dead. But the young man manages to stop the strike using his sword. The woman in turn says that she will teach him a lesson, that with balanced equipment, the more skilled fighter will always triumph. Shin is surprised to see that his opponent broke through his guard with just one movement. However, the boy fails to counter the next attack and ends up getting hit. On the ground, the protagonist is shocked to see that the woman actually tried to land a serious hit on him. But he ends up smiling as he realizes that his opponent cannot deal much damage to him with a heroic class weapon since he is wearing the Super Novice armor. The boy then gets up, startling the woman. The girl asks how he got up without a scratch, since she is sure she landed a blow to his head. Shin, in turn, comments that she will need to hit him all day long to penetrate his defense using a free heroic item. But even so, the woman says that it's cheating if someone doesn't even get hurt a little after being stabbed with a sword. After that, she tells the young man to just accept her next attack and fall. However, the boy keeps defending himself with his armor, and tells his opponent to stop with those useless attacks and just acknowledge him as her successor already. However, the woman refuses. Then she gives the protagonist credit for his fighting spirit. Shin thinks about how it's still important to maintain composure with a blade in front of him because she is still terrifying. After that, they continue their battle, and the woman comments that she didn't expect the boy to hold out for this long and that for a kid who relies on the power of his equipment, he's doing quite well. But she suggests that he give up now since even the most insignificant damage accumulates over time. The boy, in turn, refuses to give up and shouts that it is still too early to end the fight. The woman says that now it's just a matter of time because it's natural for someone who isn't trained to fall first. Then Shin advances, telling her to save those words for after he defeats her. As the fight continues, the boy thinks that to end this, he just needs to accumulate a little more damage. After that, the woman's sword ends up breaking again, causing her to take a hit on her shoulder. The girl comments that she wasn't expecting to lose another weapon. The protagonist explains that even though her sword may be heroic class, it is extremely fragile, and after that, he tells his opponent to accept him as her successor. And she in turn says that she would prefer to hand it over to someone talented, but apparently, she has no choice and didn't expect to lose to someone who relies on his equipment. The boy says that items are also skills, and tells her that he has already eliminated many players who thought like her. The girl smiles and says that her opponent is talking nonsense. But the words of a loser are just excuses, and there is nothing more she can do because the results speak for themselves. Then she admits her defeat and asks that her successor go further than she could ever reach. After that, the protagonist starts leveling up multiple times and finally returns to his original level. And he wonders what would have happened to him without his super novice set. But he decides to let it go and enjoy his rewards, the first of which is that all original player stats now increase by 25%. The second privilege is that when leveling up, the young man will receive 4 additional unallocated stat points. Seeing that, the protagonist is impressed and jumps for joy, shouting a cheer for the developers. Right after, the young man looks at his stat panel and comments that with that kind of advantage, you will be able to catch up with those who started 5 years before him. The protagonist then realizes that he has received a legendary item box and might obtain another rainbow sticker, and decides to take advantage of that opportunity to upgrade his equipment. During the night, those 2 young men are still waiting for the protagonist to come out, and after a while, the portal starts to move. One of the men says that the boy is probably coming out, so they should put out the fire quickly to avoid being detected. Shin finally emerges, looking different, and comments that he lost track of time because it is already nighttime. His new outfit is the Frenzy set, a paid item that cannot be found elsewhere, and he also obtained a specialized weapon to increase magic power. One of the young men comments that the boy is wearing different equipment, and his companion remarks that he must have gotten it inside the dungeon. Right after, the protagonist asks how long they plan to keep hiding from him. The 2 men get startled and wonder if they have been caught, but when they look to the side, they see a group of hooded figures in the mountains, who quickly rush towards Shin. The 2 players watch from a distance and wonder who those people are. Some of the hooded figures use their staffs to launch magic at the boy. However, the young man remains standing without a single scratch, leaving the 2 who are watching in complete disbelief at what they just witnessed. The protagonist thinks about how the frenzy set is working as expected since the attacks aren't even able to hurt him. The people attacking him wonder if he is really a player. A man from the group tells the others not to get nervous because their opponent must have obtained a relic item with a special effect that blocks area magic, and that they should focus on single target attacks. However, before he can continue giving instructions, the boy suddenly appears, saying that he has found the leader. Shin then attacks the man, and not only hits him but also cuts his sword in half. After their leader is defeated, the rest of the group is terrified. Then the young man asks who they are and why they are trying to attack him. An archer ignores the question and fires an arrow at the protagonist, but the boy charges forward without worrying about being hit by the arrows and explains that it won't work against the frenzy set. Then he grabs the archer and throws him against one of his companions. After that, he swings his sword and strikes both of them. One of the hooded figures approaches from behind, wondering where Shin had come from, and ends up landing a clean hit on his shoulder. The protagonist comments that even with the frenzy set, critical hits still hurt a bit. After that, he realizes that aside from the one fighting him, there is still a mage and an archer, along with 2 swordsmen acting as guards. The man he is fighting keeps trying to land a hit on him and says that he will hold him down so they can finish him off with magic. Several magic spells appear in the sky, striking the area where the young man was standing. The man says that single-target lightning magic is the best in PvE. However, the boy's voice is heard, saying that for him, there is no difference between area magic and single-target magic. The man asks how the protagonist is still alive after being hit by that attack, saying that no matter how good an item is, it has a cooldown time. Shin extends his arm and says that they are all completely mistaken, because that wasn't a special effect, it was just an extremely high defense. Right after, he summons the Death Knight into the fight. The man sees that it is the creature everyone has been talking about, and upon hearing that, the boy realizes that these people were indeed targeting him. And his opponent in turn says that those ruins belong to them and that they had been searching for the entry conditions. After that, the young man asks if that group was the only one looking for him. But the hooded man doesn't respond and simply remains silent. Then the protagonist says that all of them are just small fries and that the real leader is probably somewhere else. The lackey, in turn, comments that he thought this mission would be easier. Shin tells him not to feel bad since being ambushed is also annoying for him. The hooded man charges at the boy. However, the young man takes no damage and even counters his opponent. The system explains that the original player has the authority to judge guilty players. Seeing that, the skeleton jumps for joy, celebrating that his master defeated all the enemies using only his items. Meanwhile, the 2 players from before decide to leave and get some drinks to celebrate the fact that they survived. On the 9th floor, near a beautiful waterfall, Shin says that this is where the boss is hiding. His pet then comments that there are no signs of a monster nearby, and the young man explains that the boss here has water manipulation and can become invisible by blending into it. The knight asks if they should drain all the water, but the protagonist says he has a better plan, which is to use his companion as bait to lure the boss out. Before the monster even touches the water, the boss already emerges, biting him midair. Shin smiles, seeing that his idea worked. Right after, he charges forward and rescues the skeleton by slashing the floor boss with his sword, causing the young man to level up multiple times because of it. And with that, he earns a legendary item box. The boy comments that the reward was even better than he expected. That boss doesn't reside in a dungeon, but rather in a field, meaning it's possible to fight it solo with enough power. Since he managed to defeat the basilisk with a single strike, the young man acquires the title Extreme Power Attack. The protagonist thinks this is great because legendary titles are even more valuable than legendary items, and he promises to regain his strength by collecting those titles one by one. On the 10th floor in a mountainous area, Shin walks searching for a hidden dungeon, but that area is dangerous. He could end up dead if a high-level player attacks him, so he thinks it's best not to run into those kinds of people to avoid trouble like last night, deciding to erase his tracks with an item before farming. Then the protagonist eats an apple he had been saving for other occasions. The system notifies that the young man's presence is now hidden for 30 minutes. As he advances, the boy hopes that this dungeon is truly hidden since it used to be a popular farming spot. Climbing up a tree, he finally finds the place, the cinnamon mine where the dungeon should be located. However, before he can enter, the boy hears someone approaching. It's a pair of elves talking about some shadow elves who always try to steal from them. Shin observes the conversation from his hiding spot, wondering why he doesn't remember this race having such a bad relationship among themselves. After that, he recalls that elves are part of the interracial alliance, so it's best to avoid any conflict, making him question whether he should try to sneak in. But before he can do anything, more elves start arriving. The protagonist begins to get nervous because the effect of the apple hiding his presence is about to wear off. So he checks his inventory for something that might help. Right after, the boy decides to eat a quince because elves are sensitive to those with an affinity for nature, followed by an Yggdrasil seed. To the elves, that seed is like a treasure, as its mere existence enhances their racial abilities. But the young man thinks it would be a waste to use that item at this moment. After that, the elves sense that a human is hiding nearby just by detecting his scent. Shin raises his hands in surrender, telling them not to shoot because he has a Yggdrasil seed and only wants to talk. The elf is surprised to see what the boy is holding. The protagonist thinks that this is already a good start because he managed to get their attention. A young woman questions whether that seed is real, and her companion responds that at the very least, the scent is the same. An elf tells the others not to believe it because many of their kind have been hurt simply for trusting humans. The boy wonders what he should do since no item can resolve the natural distrust that elves have toward humans. Someone approaches asking to see the seed. It is Madame Yadri. Shin wonders if she is the leader of the group and why she is closing her eyes instead of looking at or touching the seed. After analyzing it, the woman says that it's hard to believe, but it is real because she can clearly feel the aura of Yggdrasil. The boy then takes the seed back from the woman's hands and stores it in his inventory again, asking if they can now have a serious conversation. The elves observe the situation and begin to believe that they too might be able to have an Yggdrasil. Yadri says that before they talk, there's something she needs to confirm, whether the protagonist brought the seed to trade with them. The boy replies that he did because he knows it is a very valuable item for the elven race. The woman confirms this and states that it is truly an incomparable treasure to them. However, she says that they cannot make a deal. Shin becomes frustrated and questions why, and she, in turn, explains that they cannot agree if it won't work. The young man then begins to wonder if there is another reason behind it. Right after, he says that if they are not interested in the seed, he can find something else, whatever they ask for. However, the leader says that the problem is not the seed itself, but the fact that they have nothing valuable enough to trade for Yggdrasil. The boy gets excited and says he has a great idea. The elf wonders what he is talking about. Shin then suggests that they trade items based on needs rather than value, but for that, they just need to make one or two simple requests. The woman comments that the protagonist doesn't seem to be lying. Then she asks the young man to proceed with his plan and tells him to state what he wants. Shin explains that he doesn't want anything too big, just permission to enter the mine. Upon hearing that, Yadri is shocked. Her subordinates become angry and start believing that the human must have been sent by the Shadow Elves. The boy quickly raises his hands and says that it is a misunderstanding since he doesn't even know the Shadow Elves. After that, the leader orders her guards not to act and explains that she can distinguish truth from lies, and the young man is not lying. The protagonist says that he has no interest in the ore, he just wants to explore the interior of the mine. The elf asks what his objective inside is, if not the ore. However, the young man says that it's a secret but promises not to harm any elves. The woman senses that he is telling the truth and agrees to proceed with the trade. However, as a form of security, Shin states that he will hand over the seed only after he returns. Then Yadri comments that she hopes he keeps his promise. But even so, the leader decides to send 3 elves along with the young man. Shin realizes that they are underestimating him based on the level of the ones sent to monitor him. After that, he starts wondering why this mine is so complicated now. Its structure couldn't have changed so much in just 5 years. A girl approaches the protagonist, curious about whether he is a player from another world. The protagonist says yes and asks if she came to that conclusion just by looking. Right after, the girl comments that she has heard rumors that people from other worlds like elves. Shin in turn says that no human would hate beautiful things, and she then says that he is different from the others. The boy thinks that this isn't surprising at all because, thanks to the effect of the quince, his affinity with that race has increased. However, the girl asks if he prefers regular elves or shadow elves. The boy wonders why she would ask something with such an obvious answer, and then he smiles and says that his favorites are the regular elves. After that, a voice comes from the darkness telling the girl not to force an answer. The protagonist pushes the girl aside to protect her, and wonders if they are being attacked from multiple directions. One of the elves ends up getting hit by an arrow. Then a group of hooded figures approaches, impressed that a human reacted so well to an arrow attack. The boy identifies them as shadow elves and wonders how they managed to invade the mines. The girl questions how they managed to get in since they had made sure to protect the area. The young man says that there was more than one entrance, and that he decided to hurry after hearing that a human has an Yggdrasil seed. Shin is surprised to see that this information has already leaked and wonders if there is a spy infiltrated among the elves. An elf says that combat is forbidden due to the interracial alliance law, but the man comments that if they kill all of them, there won't be any witnesses. The protagonist thinks that if he hands over the seed now, it will only put them in even more danger. The girl becomes enraged and says that they will not hand over the seed to them. Upon hearing that, the shadow elf charges toward one of her friends, kicking her far away. Then he grabs her head and slams it against the ground. Her companion calls out her name in despair. The shadow elf tells them not to move a muscle or he will rip her head off. The girl freezes upon hearing that. The man tells the protagonist that if he doesn't want to die, he should hand over the Yggdrasil seed. Shin, in turn, begins thinking that he never imagined he would encounter someone this powerful in a place like this. The elf becomes furious and tells the human that he promised to give them the seed. The man tells the boy that he will not only guarantee his life, but also protect those elves. Then the young man thinks that if he sided with the enemies, he would feel guilty, so he says that they must release the hostages first. The elf asks if he is doubting him, and the protagonist responds that he cannot trust someone who invades and takes hostages. After that, the man smirks maliciously and tells him that he has no choice, and asks if he wants to lose his limbs and have the seed taken by force. Shin in turn responds that if they keep pressuring him, he will eat the item. Upon hearing that, the shadow elf comments that the human is too calm and asks if he really thinks he can fight him after what he just saw. Right after, the boy activates defenses all over his armor, and the young man responds that the moment they gave him time to prepare, the battle was already over. Upon hearing that, the thief is confused. After that, the protagonist uses an item to create a dark smoke cloud throughout the area. The bandits panic, worrying that the cloud might be poisonous. Their leader warns them that the smoke is not deadly, but just a trick to obscure vision. Then Shin eats another apple to hide his presence. The elf wonders why he can no longer sense the human. The blonde girl calls out for her companion. After a moment, the bandit is stabbed from behind without leaving a trace. The young man explains that this is what happens when an opponent assumes they will win just because of their level, because in real combat, items are what matter. After that, the elf girl starts hearing the enemies being taken down amidst the dark smoke, and she wonders what is happening. After a while, the girl finally sees the protagonist. Shin then says that all threats have been eliminated. The girl is shocked to see that an elite squad of shadow elves was defeated in an instant. On the ground, Curiel says that he never imagined they would be reduced to nothing by a human who isn't even level 100. Right after, the girl asks why they were doing this since they had always had a good relationship with her tribe. The young man replies that he doesn't intend to answer because his lord Stellan will arrive soon to avenge him. Upon hearing that, the girl is frightened. After that, the protagonist finishes off the bandit once and for all, and comments that it's absurd for him to ask for revenge when he was the one who attacked first. By defeating that elf, the young man gains 4 levels. The girl asks what they should do because Stellan is coming, and he is the strongest and scariest of the shadow elves. Upon hearing that name, the boy thinks about how strong that leader really is, and that the first time he encountered him in the game, he decided to maintain a good relationship with his group after being defeated multiple times. Right after, Shin says that since a powerful enemy is coming, they should retreat for now and warn everyone that the shadow elves are using another passage. The girl is curious about what her companion is going to do, and he says that he will be stealthier on his own and that retreating now would be a waste of time. But considering the elves' situation, even retreating could be dangerous. After that, he hands over 3 return stones to the women, and explains that by using them, they will be able to return safely. The 3 of them exchange silent glances. Then one of the girls says that they will head back to request reinforcements because they would only be a burden if they stayed with the boy. Before leaving, they wish him luck. Shin smiles now that he's finally alone, but one of the elves stays with him and tells him that she will accompany him to his destination, adding that she has stealth skills and won't be a burden to him. After that, she comments that if they encounter Stellan, she might be able to stall for time by talking to him. The boy, in turn, thinks to himself that he was hoping to be alone, but he decides not to argue since he is already an enemy of the Shadow Elves. Right after, the young man tells the girl that they should get out of there because they don't know when their enemy will arrive. After 10 minutes, Stellan finally arrives at the scene and finds his subordinate dead after being attacked from behind. The others had also been defeated by strikes to the back. The elf then realizes that the opponent probably has stealth skills or the ability to darken the environment. One of his men arrives, reporting that they lost track of the human and that they may have retreated since they found traces of returned stone magic. However, Stellan comments that he doesn't sense any trace of a human, but does sense an elf, so they will follow that lead. Then he notices the apple that the protagonist ate to conceal his presence, realizing that this human has dangerous items. Meanwhile, as they walk, the girl asks if the boy is sure about where they are going, and he in turn wonders if the path has changed over the years. After that, Shin says that they have reached their destination. Upon seeing the place, the elf says that there is nothing there, just a dead end. The boy starts searching for something beneath the dust-covered ground. The girl questions if those are markings. Right after, the protagonist sends a party request to his companion, and she, in turn, asks why he is doing that. The young man tells her to just accept it already because he thought they had more time, but their enemy has arrived. Stellan reaches the location accompanied by his subordinates, coming face to face with the human who killed his men. He doubts that a kid who barely reached level 100 could have defeated Kiriel and the elders, who were already at level 200. Shin says that he had already made a deal with the elves for the Yggdrasil seed. The man says that there is really no reason to talk anymore and decides that he won't let the boy die quickly. But the protagonist says that killing him doesn't guarantee that the seed will drop. Stellan then says that he has a scroll that allows him to obtain any item of his choice after killing his target. Upon hearing that, the boy is shocked and asks where his opponent got that item. The man smirks, realizing that Shin recognizes the scroll, and then he uses it to set the Yggdrasil seed as his acquisition target. Shin is stunned to see that his enemy is using a paid item despite not being a player. Stellan charges forward, explaining that items are not exclusive to players. The young man smiles because his opponent is truly trying to kill him. Right after, the protagonist barely manages to block the attack, and comments that his opponent is incredibly fast. Before the Shadow Elf leader can attack again, the boy reacts but fails to hit his target. The man is surprised by that insane attack power. Shin laughs and says that he can see through the man's tricks. Stellan, in turn, explains that no matter how good his equipment is, there's still a huge level difference between them. The protagonist comments that using the right item at the right time can create unexpected results. After that, the young man throws another smoke bomb. The Shadow Elf leader wonders if this is how he eliminated his men. The boy says that this was fun, but a direct confrontation is too difficult with his current stats. Then the man realizes that he is completely blinded by the smoke, deciding to use the Void Orb, a Shadow Elf magic item. Due to that item, all the smoke is absorbed, and Stellan sees the young man and his companion escaping through the dungeon entrance. Upon seeing that, the elf furiously charges forward. About to jump, the protagonist comments that he isn't the type to get stuck in a losing battle. The man tries to stop him from leaving. Shin holds up a scroll and asks if he has ever heard of Dungeon Monopoly. That item prevents all players and NPCs except the bearer from entering. When trying to enter, the leader of the elves is sent flying away. The system informs that the dungeon entrance is controlled by Shin for a week. After that, the villain gets irritated and says that he never imagined he would lose the Yggdrasil seed right in front of him. While walking, the young man comments that their opponent must be throwing a tantrum after losing it. Shortly after, the dude finally arrives at the D-rank dungeon named the Dormant Dragon Cave. Upon entering, the protagonist thinks that if he completes that level, he might have a chance against the leader of the Dark Elves because he will obtain incredible rewards. The girl gets excited and wonders how they never found that place despite it being within their territory. After that, the girl finally realizes that this was the boy's goal from the beginning, and she had only interfered unknowingly, while he simply does not respond. The elf then questions whether just the two of them are enough to complete that dungeon. Shin comments that the more dangerous it is, the greater the reward, and the girl worries that they are too unprepared. She wonders if this is really the right path. The protagonist replies that according to his research, if they go left, they will encounter monsters. The girl gets scared and yells that they should avoid such places. As they move forward, the dude comes across glowing eyes in the middle of the darkness. Shin smiles after realizing that his companion's noises have attracted the aggro there. Soon after, several beasts start jumping toward them, and the boy gets excited at the opportunity to gain experience points. The protagonist then grabs his sword, realizing that these are the main monsters of the dragon dungeon. He advances, understanding that they are easy to kill, and that he must not let any escape. After that, he throws the first creature against the wall. Then he cuts down a few more while thinking that with those movements, it will be easier to defeat them than goblins, deciding then to leave the boss for last. Soon after, the protagonist's level increases, Meanwhile, the small elf finally eliminates one of the monsters there. She stops to observe the way her companion is fighting. She begins to wonder what kind of equipment he has to move like that. After that, the girl's level also increases. After some time, the girl approaches Shin, asking how he is so strong. She comments that it is strange for him to be more powerful than her despite being several levels below, and the boy responds that strength does not depend solely on level. He also says she knows that, but even so, there must be a limit to it. Soon after, she suggests they rest for a bit since they just went through an intense battle. However, the boy asks May to stay there because from that point on, the path is full of traps and anyone who does not know how to walk through them will end up dying. The girl is confused and asks how her companion knows it is dangerous without even having entered. Shin replies that she does not need to know that and asks not to be followed. The girl then sits down and says she will be careful. As he advances, the protagonist thinks that among the three paths, the middle one is the most dangerous because it is full of traps. After that, a huge boulder starts rolling toward the boy, making him excited to see this happen in real life. Fortunately, he knows exactly how to overcome those traps. Then the boulder passes right by him. Shin reveals that he took advantage of an opening there to dodge the rock. He then wonders if becoming a superhuman player has improved his memory, recalling that the next challenge involves some logs. As expected, several wooden logs start coming his way. The boy easily dodges them, making him realize that his memories of the game are vivid, because he can remember everything so clearly. After passing the traps, he sighs in relief and comments that it was a piece of cake as if he had done it just yesterday. Soon after, he starts looking for a brick to find his reward. Upon finding it, he thinks that no one would ever imagine there is a hidden item among those ordinary walls. Shin then presses the brick, finding a hidden box. Upon opening it, the boy finds the Ring of Luck, an item that increases luck when eaten. The young man hesitates to eat a ring. However, he sets his fear aside and swallows the item, commenting that because of swallowing it, he ended up choking. The system notifies that the player's luck has significantly increased. The protagonist then decides to use an item he had been saving now that he has maximized his luck. It is the hidden piece he found in the infernal difficulty of the tutorial. He then decides to consume the elixir, gaining a random trait which turns out to be Swordsmanship B. Seeing this, the boy is surprised. Then he gets excited for obtaining a passive combat skill there. Among all the others, this one is the most versatile of all. After that, he realizes that the trait's rank is somewhat low. But there is a way to compensate for that, the reward for completing the boss of that dungeon. With this, the boy would be able to evolve his swordsmanship traits. Shortly after, the protagonist smiles and thinks that since the Ring of Luck was in the same place as in the game, the boss reward should be the same as well. After some time, Shin returns to Mei and she says that, as expected, he came back safely. She comments that after sitting there reflecting, she realized she was more of a burden than useful. After that, she says that she has not properly thanked her companion, because thanks to him, her friends are alive as he saved them when they were being chased by the Dark Elves. The boy smiles and says that they were not a burden, and the girl, in turn, gets excited, revealing that she will help him whenever he needs. Then the protagonist suggests that they exchange contacts. After adding each other, the boy invites the elf to help defeat the stage boss. However, she replies that she believes it would be better for her to stay there because she would only get in the way. Nevertheless, Shin tells her that it's fine because he will be quick. As he walks, the young man thinks about how he no longer needs to use consumables to fight the boss, because he acquired the swordsmanship trait, which allows him to push his damage even further. After that, the duo reaches the ancient dragon. The boy asks the girl to just sit there and watch because he has a strategy. Then the beast awakens upon sensing the scent of a human. The creature then questions how he dares to desecrate its lair. Shin, in turn, says nothing and simply draws his sword. The monster gets irritated and asks how the boy dares to wield his weapon in its presence. Immediately after, the protagonist takes his fire-resistant potion so that he won't be in danger during the fight. The dragon opens its mouth, preparing to launch its first attack, firing toward the boy. May comments that the place suddenly became hot and wonders how her companion is enduring that situation. However, the boy is not burning at all in the flames and thinks that with just that level of heat, his potion is already enough. After that, he notices that the boss's breath attack is weakening over time. Then the dragon runs out of gas. Shin takes that chance to advance toward the creature, and the dragon, in turn, is surprised to see that his opponent came out unscathed from its flames. Even before attacking, the player already knows that he must strike at the exposed scales while the chest is cooling down. After taking the hit, the dungeon boss states that there is a great price to pay for touching a dragon's reverse scales. However, the boy says that his enemy is lying because he can see it trembling. The monster begins to feel fear and asks if they can have a civilized conversation, but Shin says that it is already too late for that. Then the protagonist activates the special effect of Bazer's magic sword, increasing the magic imbued in the weapon by 200%. Seeing this, the dragon gets furious and says that it will not fall alone and that for a swordsman like him, the afterlife is not enough. However, the boy says that it is already too late for that, striking the creature. Upon being hit, the monster falls to the ground. And so the protagonist defeats the secret dungeon boss. The boy breathes in relief as he receives his level ups but shows real interest in his new rewards. May approaches, saying that her companion was incredible for defeating the boss with just one hit. She then says that she earned the title of Dragon Slayer. Shortly after, the elf asks if he also obtained something incredible. The boy decides to check, discovering that he obtained the Fruit of Evolution and commenting that it was the best thing one could get from that dragon. After that, he remarks that he now has a total of 8 titles. Then the boy decides to consume his strength essence to be able to do something specific. But before he can do it, he asks why his companion was standing so close to him. The girl says that the portal is open and asks if the boy is not going to leave the dungeon already. Shin, in turn, responds that he will not do that now because there is a high chance that the Dark Elves are guarding the entrance. After that, the protagonist takes out a Fruit of Evolution, which has the function of designating a skill or trait to evolve. As he stares at the item, he thinks about how his focus at the moment is to improve his swordsmanship, and that it would be great if he could reach S rank. The boy decides to eat the fruit and comments that since he has already consumed a ring, this should be a piece of cake. He thinks that its appearance is horrible, but its taste is actually quite normal. After finishing eating, the system asks the young man to choose a skill or trait to evolve, and he decides to focus on swordsmanship. The protagonist waits anxiously for the rank, hoping for an S. Then the system announces that the player has obtained SSS swordsmanship. Seeing this, the boy falls silent and then screams in excitement for having achieved it. Meanwhile, outside the barrier, Stellan wonders where the young man is. His subordinate comments that he is being too impatient because the dungeon monopoly lasts a week, so the boy will try to delay as much as possible. The leader of the Dark Elves says that it is not a coincidence for a secret dungeon to appear there right after the boy activated that technique. One of the hooded figures warns that staying in the area is dangerous because they are in elven territory, and the guardians could arrive at any moment. The man in turn orders reinforcements to be summoned, and the servant states that he already did, revealing that this could lead to an all-out war with the elves. However, the villain is not frightened and says that he was prepared for this from the moment he arrived there because the Yggdrasil seed is his greatest desire. Upon hearing this, his subordinates remain silent. Shortly after, someone approaches the group from behind. It is the demon Pierre who orders the Dark Elves to obtain the Yggdrasil seed at any cost. Stellan says that this order could lead to a confrontation with the elves and that this is not something to be taken lightly. The demon reveals that his order is to secure the seed even if it means killing everyone. After that, he comments that the leader of the Dark Elves should have accepted his help from the beginning. One of the masked figures yells that they have their own way of doing things and that no one can guarantee the outcome of a war. Pierre gets irritated and throws the man far away. He then asks how he dares to raise his voice at him. Next, he questions if the man is forgetting that his queen's life is in his hands. Stellan asks the demon to stop. The man then says that he will let it slide this time, but next time it will not end with just a warning. After that, he tells the leader of the Dark Elves that his tribe will support him and that he should only focus on exchanging the seed for his queen's life. The man asks if they will return Her Highness if they complete the mission. And the demon, in turn, states that they will because that is the nature of a contract with his race. Shortly after, Pierre disappears. The man comments that as soon as he rescues his queen, he will kill that bastard. His subordinates ask what they should do. After that, Stellan questions what he should do because he is not the right person to decide the future of his race. He then orders his men to call for reinforcements to distract the elven guardians because they will focus on capturing the Yggdrasil seed. The villain tells his comrades not to despair because this humiliation will only last while they are without their queen, and after that, it will have a battle against the demons. Then the portal begins to react. Shin and his companions step out, saying that they already expected their opponents to be waiting for them. Stellan is impressed because they had not been inside for very long, yet their auras were completely different. Seeing that everyone is still there, the protagonist assumes that they have not yet clashed with the elves. The man asks what the young man did inside the dungeon, and the boy, in turn, says that such information is very valuable and that he will not give it away for free. Immediately after, the villain gets irritated and says that his opponent is being too arrogant. However, soon he will be crying and begging for mercy. Stellan thinks about how the target of the scroll is still in effect even though half a day has already passed. The protagonist asks May to stay back. After that, the villain advances quickly and tells his opponent to try and catch him if he can. After that, the man turns invisible before the battle begins. The elf asks her companion to be careful because it will be difficult to react to an attack at that speed. The leader of the Dark Elves shouts that he will do his best to eliminate the protagonist. Then he launches an attack from above, but Shin manages to defend against the strike, making the man wonder how that player is able to keep up with his speed. The boy reveals that he can see all of his enemies' attack patterns. Stellan then says that he will surpass him by using sheer strength to cut both him and his weapon in half. After all, only a sword aura can block another one. After some time fighting, the man assumes that the protagonist must have gained an ability with his weapon inside the dungeon. The young man in turn tells him that he guessed correctly. Seeing their leader struggling, the hooded figures charge forward to assist him. The boy kicks the villain away to deal with his minions. Stellan orders his men to stay back because they are not strong enough. However, it is already too late, as with just one strike, the young man defeats them all. The leader of the Dark Elves watches as he thinks about how skilled the boy's swordsmanship is. Shin thinks about how his opponent admitted to defeat the moment he realized he was outmatched, and he decides not to make enemies of the Dark Elves due to their great influence in the multiracial alliance. Then he asks May what she thinks about the Dark Elf leader's surrender, and she responds that she doesn't care. So the protagonist decides to forgive him without imposing any conditions. However, he must apologize to the elves. After that, the boy asks why the man decided to go after the Yggdrasil seed personally. However, Stellan does not answer the question and simply kneels, begging for the item in exchange for everything his tribe can offer. Shin is taken aback by how desperate his former opponent is. Then the young man says that they should clarify this situation first because he wants to know how the story has progressed over the past 5 years. He then asks why the elf needs the seed so badly. The man closes his eyes and remains silent. After that, the protagonist receives a message from the man, explaining that his queen has been taken hostage by the demon race. The boy is confused, and Stellan says that it is a very complicated matter, so he prefers to discuss it through messages. Shin sends a message asking if the man knows the whereabouts of the royal figure. The leader of the Dark Elves says that she is confined in her own residence, with demonic guards stationed around her. Shortly after, he explains that the demons promised to release her if he handed over the Yggdrasil seed to them. After hearing the whole story, the protagonist thinks that it would be a good idea to defeat those demons, as it could lead to an extremely important achievement. Outside, Yodri finally receives the seed. Shin is surprised to see how happy the elves are just to receive a single seed. Then he decides to prepare for the next mission, finding an item that seems perfect for the situation. The Holy Spirit Cloak is such a broken item that even high-level players would envy it. The equipment's additional 250% damage is highly effective against those with the Dark attribute. And luckily for the young man, all demons have this attribute. The leader of the elves approaches, inviting the protagonist to a grand festival. They are planning to celebrate Yggdrasil's return. Shin, in turn, thanks her for the invitation, but says that he won't be able to attend because something else has come up. May asks if this farewell means the end. The boy replies that it does not, as he will return as soon as he finishes his mission. Yodri stops to think and realizes that thanks to the boy, May and the children were saved. And she says that she now owes him her life and an Yggdrasil seed. After that, she states that because of this debt, the elves will always be ready to help him. The player takes advantage of the moment and asks the woman for a favor. This request is to halt battles with the Dark Elves for a while, as his next destination is their territory. The woman says that this request is easy to fulfill because the elves who occupy the mine have already left. Then, May asks if the protagonist doesn't want reinforcements since meeting with Stellan alone is dangerous. Shin tells them not to worry as he is not going there to fight them. Yodri says that the young man is truly different from other humans as he is putting himself in danger for the sake of the forest's peace, and she decides to grant him this favor. The boy thanks the elven representative for agreeing to such a difficult request, and she, in turn, says that it was nothing. After that, the young man decides to set off on his next adventure. After his departure, the protagonist sends a message to Stellan asking for a guide. In the misty forest near the Dark Elves' residence, Shin walks alongside a mysterious person, and he starts thinking that if he were alone, he would just keep wandering around aimlessly. Shortly after, he finally meets up with Stellan, who tells him that his village is just ahead. The boy asks if the demons have not noticed his presence, and the man in turn says that they have been very cautious regarding the queen and then asks the player if he is really fine with fighting the demons. The young man then explains that they do not need to worry because he has already thought of a way to deal with that race. After that, the protagonist remarks that it seems the Dark Elves have given up on the seed, and Stellan explains that the item was just a stalling tactic until they found a way to save the queen. Then he comments that it would be great if he and the young man could fight the demons together, but that is impossible because he is blocked from entering the village, so he can only trust in the boy's strength. Shin smiles and says that his companion is quite straightforward. Shortly after, the man reaches his limit of proximity to the village and states that if he goes any further, there is a chance he might trigger their surveillance. The protagonist says that he can leave everything to him now and that they will discuss the reward after solving the problem. Inside the Dark Elves' residence, a woman is lying on her bed. Meanwhile, someone informs Pierre that a human presence has suddenly appeared in the village, and the demon comments that he has a suspicion of who it is. His companion, Sheila, asks if it is the person who possesses the Yggdrasil seed, and he replies that it is. The woman asks how he managed to get there, and the demon responds that the Dark Elves may have failed or betrayed them. Then Pierre orders her to go check on the situation, and that after killing him, she should check if he still has the seed. Sheila then states that torturing humans is her specialty. Shin walks through the village, curious as to why no one has appeared yet, even though he is making his presence very clear. After that, Pierre's companion appears in front of him, and he wonders if she is one of the demons occupying the village. The woman gives the boy the option to hand over the seed willingly and become her slave, and he in turn, smiles and comments that the arrogance of the demons is just as it was in the game. Immediately after, the young man thanks Sheila for approaching him with her guard down, and then he activates his trap, binding the demoness with golden chains. The woman becomes furious and asks why she cannot escape. The protagonist explains that those are cursed shackles, a mythical level item that only a demon king can break. After that, Shin decides to take advantage of the moment to call for reinforcements, and then the death knight is summoned. The woman starts calling out for Pierre's help, but he responds that he cannot go because he is guarding the queen. The boy draws his sword, saying that it is time to level up a bit. Sheila begins begging for her life. However, the young man does not listen and finishes her off with a single strike. As her last words, the demoness expresses disbelief that she was defeated in a place like that. Shin says that soon she and Pierre will be reunited. Immediately after, the protagonist levels up 4 times, also gaining a 15% increase in damage dealt to demons. After that, the skeleton starts evolving as well. Upon checking his pet's stats, the boy comments that investing in that expensive item was worth it because the skill growth is incredible. Pierre appears at the scene saying that Sheila's defeat was not part of the plan and questioning how the young man managed to do that. The boy is startled to see that the demon appeared out of nowhere, and he decides to put as much distance between them as possible. Then he tells the man that his battle with the woman ended the moment he swung his sword. Pierre gets irritated and asks once again how Shin defeated his companion. The protagonist is impressed by that terrifying aura. Paranet yells that if his master wanted to attack, the opponent would not stand a chance. Immediately after, he states that he will handle that demon himself. Seeing this, the boy wonders why his survival instinct skill is not working properly. Pierre says that he was considering giving the young man a painless death if he had answered, but now he is irritated. The skeleton tells the demon to shut up and prepares to attack. However, the boy counterattacks, isolating Paranet far away. Shin is surprised because his pet was defeated with just one attack, even while wearing legendary armor. After that, the demon states that he will already be punished by his superiors, so he has decided to take the protagonist's head and hope for mercy. And he says that by facing the young man head-on, he will discover how he defeated Sheila. Seeing his opponent draw his sword, the boy thinks that he only needs to trust in his SSS-level swordsmanship to win this duel. Pierre charges forward to land the first strike, but Shin manages to react in time. The demon asks how a human just a little above level 100 was able to block his attack, and the protagonist in turn mocks him by asking the enemy to use more force because this was way too easy. Upon hearing that, the villain asks how he dares to insult him and continues attacking relentlessly. Shortly after, the boy blocks one of the strikes, and he takes advantage of his opponent's lowered guard to try and land a hit. Pierre is shocked because his neck would have been severed if he hadn't blocked with his hand. However, even so, the man starts bleeding profusely. The protagonist tells his opponent that he did well to defend himself. With a silent gaze, the demon wonders who this young man really is. After that, he regenerates his hand using one of his healing abilities. And then he starts thinking that his strength and agility are superior due to his level, yet the opponent's swordsmanship is still dangerous. Shin tells his enemy to come at him again after regenerating and that the result will be the same. Pierre in turn charges forward, saying that victory is not decided by swordsmanship alone. Then he explains that he can heal, even if he is cut, and that with a single strike, he will finish off the protagonist. But even so, the boy manages to disarm his opponent, and he states that he knows very well what the demon's weakness is. If his heart is in pieces, his regeneration slows down. Pierre places his hand on the boy's shoulder and repeats that battles are not decided by swordsmanship alone. The young man wonders what kind of attack this is. A massive purple aura appears, covering both of them, making Shin scream in pain. The demon explains that this is an ability called Black Enlightenment, which inflicts all the damage he has suffered at once. Immediately after, a massive explosion occurs, engulfing the entire village. Pierre says that those who let their guard down die, and that is what makes battles exciting. However, he adds that there is no point in explaining anything because the protagonist will not be able to understand in his current state. After that, he is surprised that the human lost consciousness while still standing, and he touches his chest, telling him to pass out already. However, the boy's body turns into a straw doll. That was a talisman doll, an item used only in preset situations because it has to be installed in advance. Immediately after, Shin appears behind the demon, questioning where he was looking. Then he takes advantage of the opportunity to attack. As he tries to strike Pierre, a barrier appears to defend him. The protagonist wonders how his opponent still has enough magic power to cast a defensive spell. After that, he steps back from the demon, and he thinks that he needs to finish this battle before his opponent recovers his magic power because it will be dangerous if he suffers that attack again. A voice calls for them to stop fighting, and a crowd appears in the arena. They are the Dark Elves who have been freed, and Stellan has managed to rescue the Queen. Shin asks if his companion was the one who cast that barrier around the demon. With a smile on his face, Pierre asks the Dark Elf if he has a plan to deal with the consequences of betraying his race. The young man, in turn, does not answer that question and remains silent with a hateful gaze. Shortly after, the boy asks why he was stopped from defeating the demon. The Queen says that the young man must not kill his enemy. because her life is tied to his, and if Pierre dies, she will not survive. Stellan states that the moment his queen woke up, a hidden curse was activated. An elf asks if that means her highness is not safe. Observing the situation, the protagonist thinks that there was probably a lack of communication. After that, the demon asks what the human will do now that he knows about this. And then he shouts to everyone that if they value their queen's life, they should capture that boy. Stellan is shocked by the order he just received. Pierre laughs and says that even his last heart might stop. Then he thinks that as soon as his magic power recovers, all of this will come to an end. Shinnon asks the elves to take the opportunity to capture the demon since his power is depleted. The man asks if that is true. After being exposed, Pierre orders no one to approach because even though he is weak, he can still eliminate himself. The boy thinks that even if it is just a threat, the elves cannot gamble with the queen's life. After that, the demon orders everyone to hurry and capture that human. But the queen commands that no one move, because regardless of the situation, they should not chase someone who is there to help them. The villain continues his provocations and says that the woman cannot make decisions because her life is at risk, adding that they need to act since they were willing to go to war with the elves for her. The woman asks if that is true, and Stellan apologizes, explaining that they were being manipulated. The protagonist realizes that apparently the queen was unaware of the conflict between the elves. Shortly after, the woman gets angry at her subordinates for making such foolish decisions and questions if they really believed the demon would keep his promise. Stellan explains that they had no choice because if they did not go through with everything, the woman would have been in danger. After that, the queen shouts to everyone that if they pursue her benefactor, she will eliminate herself to maintain their trust. Watching the situation from a distance, Pierre begins to wonder how the woman managed to wake up and decides to find a way to escape from there. Shin takes a deep breath and thinks that now it is his turn to act. Then the young man says that he has a solution. The queen in turn explains that the curse placed on her is of a high level and cannot be easily broken. The dark elf asks if he has an elixir or something similar, and the protagonist lies, saying that he does not because it is too valuable to use on a high-level curse. However, he decides to hand another item to Stellan. The demon laughs and says that he cast that curse personally, so it is not just any dubious thing that can break it. Shin tells Pierre to shut up and wait for his death. Then he gives the dark elf a holy purification potion, which can completely remove any curse affecting the body, regardless of its level. The man is overjoyed and says that this might solve this queen's problem. After that, the woman apologizes to the protagonist because while she was asleep, her people caused many problems. The boy says that maybe she should apologize to the elves instead of him. Then the woman declares that from now on, the dark elves will forever honor the boy as their benefactor. Shin says that as compensation, he only wants some dole grass, which is native to that region. The queen says that this condition is acceptable and asks if she needs to drink the entire potion she received. Pierre tells her not to do it because it will not be able to break the curse. Shortly after, Stellan appears behind the enemy and tells him not to move because he has no intention of killing him for now, as it was an order from her highness. Then the woman drinks the potion. A strong glow appears all over her body. Seeing that, the demon says that he has recovered enough magic power to escape from there. He then flies away, threatening the human with revenge. But before he can flee, he is struck in the wings and falls. The queen asks where he thought he was going. After that, the protagonist appears before Pierre, who's falling to the ground, and says that he will die there. Before the demon can fight back, the boy slices his enemy in half, making Shin level up multiple times and earning items such as a demonic essence and a low-class horn. The next morning in his room, the player decides to reflect on everything that happened during his adventure, starting with his war trophy. The young man says that he never imagined the Queen of the Dark Elves would offer such a rare item. Before leaving, Stellan hands his companion the dole box he had requested. The woman in turn says that she had hoped to present him with a meal, but apparently he was already on his way out. The protagonist apologizes, saying that he has little time. Shortly after, the queen tries to think of another way to reward her benefactor. Then she hands him a small box and apologizes for not being able to give him something greater. Back in his room, the boy says that this war trophy is slightly below what he received in the tutorial, but rewards like this are still very rare. Upon consuming the item, the boy gains the keen senses trait. The young man gets excited because that is one of the best rank traits and has one of the best passive combat abilities. After that, he lies on the bed, saying that his luck is truly terrifying. And he starts thinking about how he didn't just gain items in this adventure, but also maximize his reputation with the elves. However, that last battle was a bit dangerous, and that without his safety items, he would have been seriously injured. Shin comments that if he could use his inventory items freely, he would be practically invincible. Shortly after, he decides to organize his inventory because he doesn't even know what he has in there anymore. However, he starts wondering if he really needs to use his inventory manually, and he thinks about whether there is a way to manage it with his mind. He decides to test it by navigating through various tabs. After his tests, the boy says that using his mind works. However, he knows that he still needs more practice. Then he looks at the blue dole grass he received for helping the Dark Elves. In the game, that was the best item one could receive as it maximized affinity with the race. The young man says that this was the best outcome of that mission. After that, the next item he decides to check is the Omnipotence Stone, which had been rotting in his inventory. On its own, the rock is worthless, but when combined with dole grass, it can become the best item for his class. Upon merging the two, a strong light illuminates the entire room. With all that brightness, the boy comments that he's going blind. However, the important thing is that the stone was successfully synthesized on the first attempt. Shortly after, he decides to combine the item with his main weapon, and he wonders if anyone besides him has ever done this before. The system asks if the player wants to use the omnipotence stone on the Bazar magic sword. Shin, in turn, accepts. Meanwhile, in a residential area of a high-level guild, someone shows a video of the player who has been rumored lately. That person is the Fire Empress Yoon, who asks if the footage is of the one supposedly returning from the ancient ruins. The man replies that yes and says that the top guilds are considering recruiting this new rising star, then asks the woman if they should also place their bets. The girl starts watching the video, and she notices that the person in the footage is wearing something that resembles the Fury armor set. After that, she starts thinking that ever since she arrived here, she hasn't seen anyone using those paid items. And then she wonders why someone like that is in the lower floors if they previously played War of Gods. Shortly after, the man asks if the woman has discovered anything. June smiles and starts thinking that the idea of someone staying below level 100 for 5 years is absurd. Then she explains that it is her first time seeing that young man. However, that is definitely in the Fury set, and he most likely received it as a reward from an ancient dungeon. Her assistant reports that the protagonist has already reached the 15th floor after leaving the ruins, and that he is progressing at an unprecedented speed. The woman gets excited upon hearing that and asks if it is true. After that, she stands up, saying that none of the top-ranked players have managed to do that, and that even she did not clear the lower floors that quickly. The man says that if this is true, they should join the recruitment war, and he takes the opportunity to ask if Yoon has heard about that boy. The woman states that the identities of the top players are well known. Some died, while those who survived became rankers. However, the only one who does not fit into that category is the F2P player. The man asks if she is talking about the one considered a kind of urban legend. Then he mentions that this player attempted the Infernal Difficulty tutorial, and he assumes that he must already be dead. Upon hearing that, the woman sits down, thinking that if the F2P player were alive, he would definitely be among the top-ranked, not just some rookie. But still, if that legend were alive, things would be far more interesting. Elsewhere, the protagonist is fighting against a creature. After slicing it to pieces, he levels up again. Then the boy comments that upgrading his weapon has allowed it to pierce through higher level monsters easily, and that those below level 300 can't even stand a chance against him. After checking the weapon's stats, he smiles, pleased to have such a powerful sword. After that, the young man receives a message from Stellan asking if he is ready, and he, in turn, doesn't understand what his companion is talking about. The man then reminds him that Shin had mentioned he was going to enter the Battle of the Species. In the Tower of Infinity, the protagonist explains that after the Dark Elf incident, Stellan sent him good news. It was about a grand event called the Battle of the Species, which was just around the corridor. Shortly after, he remembers that this event didn't exist in the game before and starts wondering how difficult it will be. The Battle of the Species is for those below level 300 and is a biannual tournament to determine the next best fighter of each race. Then he decides to observe the species present, noticing dwarves for the first time in this world. In the room, there are also some orcs with massive muscles, and then he wonders if he should go where the humans are. After that, he remembers that, according to what Stellan explained, even if someone dies in the battle, they will only be eliminated and not truly die, which is why everyone there is so relaxed. Shin begins to notice that everyone in the room is staring at him. People start whispering that he is the rumored player, and they begin commenting on the boy's armor. Upon hearing that with his enhanced hearing ability, the young man thinks about how he hoped his information wouldn't spread so widely, and that unwanted attention is truly a hassle. Shortly after, the system announces that the Battle of the Species will begin soon, and then a light descends upon everyone, teleporting the protagonist to a familiar place. He quickly realizes that it is a modern city, specifically Seoul. Someone wonders if they return to the real world. However, they quickly notice that this place is artificial, as there is no one walking the streets, and they ask if anyone has participated in this before. A man raises his hand saying that he has, and explains that this is a type of virtual space and every battle of the species takes place in a different location. Shin realizes that everyone was scattered when they were teleported here because the number of people in the tower does not match those present. After that, the players are notified that the first group mission will begin soon, and that their objective is to eliminate the Jiangxi army. Seeing this, a man comments that this is a regular mission, and says that everyone should consider themselves lucky, as hunting missions are the easiest. But then he starts questioning if only 50 of them can really handle hunting 500 monsters. So he asks the protagonist to follow his instructions, because no matter how good his equipment is, if the enemies surround him, he will die instantly. Shin, in turn, finds it funny that the guy is trying to keep him under control. Meanwhile, on top of a building, the dwarves realize that they ended up in the same group as the humans. However, they decide to just watch them fight the monsters. Shortly after, the Jiangxi arrive at the location, and the close combat fighters must be the first to advance. The young man approaches that guy, asking if he has fought these enemies before, and the man responds that they are nothing, and that they are weak compared to regular undead. Upon hearing that, the protagonist realizes that this player has never fought the Jiangshi because this species is also considered undead. A boy attacks one of the creatures with his sword. However, he realizes that his blade isn't working, and calls for the mages and archers to join the fight. That same man orders everyone to step back because they are going to unleash a powerful spell, causing a massive explosion. However, the Jiangshi are still not defeated. Now the man is terrified as the undead approaches him, but Shin appears to save him and tells him to stop screaming so much. The man falls to the ground, saying that he almost died. Then the young man thinks that to defeat these creatures, only transcendental weapons like his will have any effect. However, even he would face complications if attacked by a horde. All the other players are shocked after seeing a Jiangshi defeated with a single strike. The mage, however, gets annoyed and says that if the protagonist had skills like that, he should have protected the guy from the beginning, questioning if he just wanted to show off. Shin's expression darkens as he asks what the guy means by showing off. The man gets scared and explains that he just thinks they should work together. After that, the boy thinks about how the reward is based on the individual's rank, so there is no point in talking to the others. Somewhere else, a group of people asks for support as they are being pressured by monsters. Upon seeing the number of Jiangshi, the young man asks where they are coming from. A girl screams, suggesting that they should retreat. However, the mage does not like the idea because by now the other groups were already taking advantage of their achievements. Shin starts walking forward while thinking about how pathetic that man was because if he couldn't surpass level 300 in 3 years, then he was just trash. Immediately after, he advances, attacking all the creatures he sees ahead with just one strike. A player questions whether what they are seeing is real, and a young man in turn says that it was to be expected because that was the famous rookie of the ancient ruins, and the most incredible part was that he wasn't even level 200 yet. The protagonist continues to massacre those undead alone, and the man is impressed because his colleague was at a lower level than him. After defeating another Jiangshi, the boy levels up once more. Shin starts thinking about how good that earned experience was and that killing those things was going to be easy. However, he notices that the monsters keep coming toward him, so he decides to jump onto the top of a bus. Upon seeing the undead gathering in large numbers, the protagonist comments that in moments like that, an area attack would be perfect. He then remembers that Paranet has such an attack, being an S-rank skill. Right after that, one of the Jiangshi tries to advance by surprise, but the young man eliminates it with ease and says he expected someone to try to climb to the top. Immediately after it, he takes the opportunity to summon his pet. Then the skeleton appears, almost falling off the bus. However, his master manages to catch him before he falls among the creatures. Paranet asks the boy to pull them up quickly. However, Shin tells him to stop talking nonsense and use his corpse explosion skill immediately. The skeleton in turn decides to obey the order, causing a massive explosion. After that, the protagonist says that if he hadn't dodged quickly, he probably would have been caught in it too. The other players start running away from the remaining Jiangshi. Then the young man begins to mock the pet's aim because he had the chance to eliminate all the undead that were clustered together. Shin realizes that Paranet had now shrunk in size, and the skeleton explains that he had used all his mana on big spells but was already recharging. The boy, in turn, asks if the skeleton can use corpse explosion only until he runs out of mana. Immediately after, the system informs that there are still 370 Jiangshi left to be defeated. Shin decides to check his status window and notices that 204 points remain unused. He starts thinking that if he waits for the mana recharge, he will be at a disadvantage, so he decides to use those points to increase his agility. After investing all of them, the protagonist is sure that he will get first place and take all the rewards. However, before returning to action, he decides to test those enhanced abilities, realizing that he now feels much lighter. After that, he asks Paranet to keep recovering his strength and to use the corpse explosion again as soon as he sees his signal. Then the boy jumps from the top of the building, catching the attention of the Jiangshi. The boy advances, thinking that this is his chance to monopolize that gold mine of experience points. Thus, he quickly defeats the first undead. Then he starts drawing the attention of the others, and asks Paranet to fire as soon as the monsters gather. The skeleton finally launches the attack. After that attack, someone reports that 31 Jiangshi were killed, and comments that they were lucky to find that group because, at that pace, they would definitely enter the rankings. However, they noticed that the number of undead there had decreased a bit and questioned whether they should look for another hunting group. The people standing there remained still, observing the situation. A girl approaches them, asking what they were staring at, discovering then that they had already successfully completed the first mission and that the rewards would be distributed according to the ranking. Someone starts comparing the protagonist to the rookie who was going viral. Immediately after, the system begins displaying the top 3 of the mission, and Shin is at the top of the list in first place, with an impressive total of 398 eliminations, and the other players start wondering if that was even possible. The woman becomes irritated because she never imagined that a mage would lose first place to a swordsman. The boy realizes that killing with skills definitely counted as points, The mage starts thinking about how confident she was that she would even surpass the guild executives. Immediately after, the system announces that a special reward will be given to the protagonist for eliminating the most Jiangshi. Seeing that, the young man comments that he will receive 2 gifts, the first place reward and the special one. Then the young man receives an agility essence for ranking first, deciding to consume the item immediately. After that, as a special reward, the system informs him that he will gain the Frozen Field skill. Shin gets excited upon realizing that they were giving out an A-rank magic skill as a reward, and decides that he will win the next mission as well. After that, someone approaches the protagonist from behind, calling out to him. And upon looking, he is met with a crowd asking if he wants to join their guilds. The boy, in turn, says that he can exchange contacts, but he has no interest in joining any guilds. Then he gets startled by the number of conversation requests. While accepting, the young man comments that having dozens of status windows popping up makes his head spin. Immediately after, the system informs everyone that the second mission is about to begin, and that they will be teleported to random locations within the next area. Shin is then teleported to another place, being notified that he must now rescue the player Sim Sang-hoon, who is trapped somewhere in the labyrinth. The young man says that it won't be easy since he is not very good when it comes to directions. Then he comments that, apparently, those structures were of a typical labyrinth, and that by the looks of it, that mage wasn't such a liar after all. After that, he calls for Paranet because to him, Labyrinth's stories were different, and then tells the pet that he will be responsible for guiding him. After that, the skeleton says that he can feel a menacing energy coming from that direction, and warns that if they go that way, it will be dangerous. However, instead of retreating, the protagonist decides to advance. Paranet says that his master should be heading in the other direction. With a smile, Shin says that the greater the danger of a place, the better the rewards they can obtain. Immediately after, someone appears in his path saying that the young man must have a death wish since he is walking alone in a species battle. Those were creatures of the holy race, masters of magic who had been accustomed to mana since birth. After that, one of them fires at the protagonist. The monster comments that, as expected, humans are worse than insects. However, they notice that there is no body at the site of the explosion, and they wonder if the young man was thrown far away. But Shin appears from behind, knocking down 2 of the 3 that were there. Then he advances to eliminate the last one, taking him down with just 1 slash. The system notifies that the boy has earned 3 hunting points. After that, the young man explains that even though those opponents were massive mana wells, they were still bad at agility. After noticing that Paranet was hiding, he questions whether the skeleton still thinks it's dangerous. The skeleton then reveals that they have yet to encounter the real danger, which will be at the end of the path. Shin smiles and says that it sounds exciting. Immediately after, the pet starts pointing out the most dangerous paths to his master, making the boy's hunting points exceed 10,000. Paranet says that the real crisis hasn't even begun yet, but with his master's strength, there will be no need to worry. Then the protagonist asks when the real danger will start, and the skeleton replies that it will be soon. After that, the system announces that the next trial is approaching for players who have already collected 10,000 hunting points. The ground beneath the boy opens up a massive hole, making him realize that the key to that mission was really the hunting points. With that, Shin gets close to the abyss where the target player is located. Upon seeing the message, the young man understands that the labyrinth was just a distraction. Then he wonders if that was truly the abyss. That place was one of the hardest in the game and was content that was only revealed after reaching level 400. After that, the boy thinks that it must not be the real abyss since this is an event for players below level 300. After that, he reaches a part where there is a gigantic monster. Realizing that this was the true abyss, the creature orders the young man not to approach or else it will kill him. That is Oraiden, an extremely powerful guardian, recommended to be faced with a group of at least 6 people. Shin becomes worried because to be on equal footing with that thing, he would need to be at least level 400. However, he starts remembering that there is a technique other players accidentally discovered. He begins to question where that monster's weakness is. The protagonist feels frustrated because his memory should be better now that his physical abilities have improved with the system's support. Then he notices that the Guardian is wearing a ring, remembering that it was its source of power, and that, in the past, players discovered a way to remove the ring alone. After that, he takes out a scroll that can randomly return a piece of the target's equipment to his own inventory. Shin then shouts that this strategy is completely broken. The system notifies that the target of the equipment removal scroll has been set to Oraiden, causing the ring to fall to the ground. The boy realizes that the item fell because the creature does not have an inventory. Immediately after, he grabs Paranet and throws him toward the ring. Oraiden demands that they return his item. However, before he can do anything, his strength begins to disappear. The protagonist appears behind the Guardian and says that he is shrunk enough to be cut down in one strike. The creature in turn wonders how the player dares to use such a cheap trick. After that, Oraiden is cut into multiple pieces. Shin smiles because his attack combos hit the target perfectly. Upon defeating the monster, the boy levels up several times and earns new titles. The young man sighs in relief after seeing that the strange method worked. Then the system notifies him that he has acquired the Abyss entrance ticket. Shin wonders if it is an exclusive event item from the map. After that, he decides to use his Oridan Exterminator title, increasing his total defense by 10%. The protagonist knew that this was expected from a mythical title, which has great effects and strong growth potential. Immediately after, Paranet appears, questioning how his master could throw him like that at a monster. However, the boy doesn't care in the slightest and asks his pet to hand over the ring, leaving him sad for not being prioritized. The item then shrinks in the young man's hand, and he explains that size adjustment is a basic feature for equipable items. That ring has the option to increase all abilities proportionally to the user's magic power. The young man gets excited and says he expected nothing less from an Oridan drop. However, he soon discovers that he cannot equip the object. Upon learning this, the protagonist becomes extremely sad and feels confused about what happened. After that, the system announces that the second mission will be forcibly ended, and Shin wonders if it was because he used a trick. Then he discovers that a player was expelled, making him realize that it wasn't his fault. Shin is satisfied that he wasn't marked as an exploit abuser. After that, the next mission begins, where there are two factions and their members will be assigned randomly by race. Special rewards will be given to those who achieve the highest amount of merits, and upon seeing that, the protagonist really likes this phase. Immediately after, the boy receives the information that he has been assigned to the Sloth faction. Shin, in turn, decides that he must first find the commander. However, he doesn't like the idea of only earning points if the superiors take notice. Some other players start searching for the Sloth faction's commander. A voice suddenly tells everyone to shut up because it's not like she wanted to be the boss, and a young man questions who is saying that. A girl appears in front of them, and the men comment that a child cannot hold that position. The girl in turn says that she doesn't care about what they say because, after all, she is the commander. After that, a player questions who would risk their life to fight if the leader was someone so small. The girl then explains that they don't need to freak out because players don't actually die for real. Then she turns around and says that talking to inferiors only lowers her standards. But before leaving, she advises them that if they consider themselves slothful, they should act like it and take things slowly before rushing in. Everyone begins to wonder what the general was talking about. From a distance, Shin observes the situation and comments that he thought the mission would be easy since it was simple. But apparently, his first obstacle will be changing the heart of a lazy child. In the courtyard, people wonder what they should do with the commander who hides in her tent. A man gets irritated and says he will take command because they can't just stand around doing nothing. However, when he tries to enter the tent, he is thrown far away, concluding that a barrier has been placed around the cabin. The commander appears, warning them not to approach, and that if they don't watch their words, they will be eliminated next time. All the players there end up feeling scared by that threat. After that, they question what they should do because, at that rate, they won't be able to accomplish anything. Shin watches the commotion and wonders if they are really going to lose without even fighting. Immediately after, he decides to summon Paranet and asks why he is still in that small version, to which the skeleton replies that it's because his master needs magical area attacks. Upon hearing that, the young man thinks that being able to use crisis detection and corpse explosion is not a bad thing. Then he asks the pet to equip his ring, making him happy to be receiving a gift. The boy tells Paranet not to get excited because it's just a soul-bound item. While equipping the ring, Shin says that he will squeeze every bit of value out of the skeleton. After that, he decides to check the pet's new status, and is surprised to see that they are now higher than his own. Paranet starts laughing and comments that it looks like he has surpassed his limits. Then he begins showing off his new abilities. A girl suddenly appears, saying that she expected nothing less from the summon of the famous rookie, leaving the dude curious about how long she had been there. Immediately after, the player introduces herself as Hong Yeji and explains that she had been sitting nearby for quite some time. The skeleton, in turn, comments that this woman is quite suspicious. The girl decides to get straight to the point and asks if they are interested in joining her group. However, Shin chooses not to accept the invitation. The girl asks if he would still refuse if she could make the faction leader come out of her tent, and upon hearing that, the protagonist asks if that's possible. Hong Yeji says yes, and that she can get the commander out of the tent. The young man starts thinking about how Uni doesn't have an answer when it comes to the commander. Then the woman says that if he joins her group, she will make sure he gets noticed by the leader, and the boy, in turn, comments that she is good at negotiating. Shin then decides to accept the invitation on the condition that both of them will survive. The girl accepts the terms and says she is satisfied with the group's experience. After forming an alliance, the protagonist mentions that he is very curious about the method she will use. Hong Yeji, in turn, says that he will find out when the time comes. After that, he takes a deep breath and shouts in front of the commander's tent, demanding that she come out. The leader appears, questioning the audacity of such an act, and reminds them that she will eliminate anyone who disturbs her again. Upon seeing that, Shin comments that the commander seems more than just a little angry, and the girl says it's fine, because if this follows the game she played before, it won't be dangerous. After hearing that, the protagonist relaxes because that person is a player from War of Gods, Immediately after, Han Yeji starts confronting the commander, saying that she should be fighting against the enemy faction alongside them. The commander, in turn, gets irritated and says she will give her subordinate a horrible death. However, the girl is not scared and says that her colleague is good at making threats. After that, the young commander becomes very furious. But before she can do anything, Han Yeji comments that her superior cannot kill people. Upon hearing that, the general immediately stops and the girl asks if she is really correct. Then her body starts to glow. The commander questions what the young woman is doing. Han Yeji appears in casual clothing and explains that her defense is now at 5, so she asks the leader to be careful not to hurt her. After that, she advances toward the leader, realizing that she isn't even using her claws. The girl asks if the subordinate even knows what she is doing. Immediately after, the commander retracts her claws, indicating that she is ready to talk. The girl gets close to her leader's ear and whispers that she knows she cannot kill because of the mana curse, but promises to keep it a secret. And the commander then questions what her subordinate actually wants. Han Yeji says that all she wants is for the protagonist to be noticed during the event, and that she would also love to be monitored as well. The faction leader says that her subordinate is only alive because of the restrictions. The girl laughs and says that she doesn't like resorting to that kind of method. Then, the commander flies away, positioning herself at an observation point, and everyone in the group wonders if their leader is finally playing her role. Han Yeji approaches the protagonist, saying that she has fulfilled her part as promised and that the rest is now up to him. After that, everyone is notified that the Pride faction is advancing toward them, and that the enemies have orcs on their team who are famous for their combat skills. The girl says that the opponent's numbers are much greater and asks if they will be able to win. Shin, in turn, explains that the numbers are actually the same, but they seem larger because their enemies are bigger in size. Immediately after, he explains that the main forces on that side are the orcs and trolls. The young man then says that from the way they are positioned, they are trying to use their size advantage to apply pressure, and Han Yeji comments that if they do that, they will be exposed to any attacks. The boy states that this is the Pride faction, so obviously they will be overconfident. The girl asks if they will really attack even knowing that they will die. Then the enemy faction's commander appears on the battlefield, ordering his subordinates to break down those walls, and then all the monsters begin to advance. Han Yeji comments that they really take the Pride in their faction's name seriously. All the members of the Sloth faction decide not to wait for their commander's orders and start attacking without hesitation. Some creatures are hit by magical explosions. The enemy leader tells his men to block the magic with their bodies instead of cowering behind a shield. However, the monsters start to think that their commander has gone mad. An orc throws his subordinate far away and says that if they want to live, they should conquer the castle. The creatures begin to panic amid the explosions and comment that this strategy makes no sense, even for their species. Immediately after, they finally decide to focus on the wall. However, a massive spell appears right above them, making the creatures completely lose hope. Upon seeing those large-scale fusion attacks, the protagonist realizes that there are some interesting people on his side. Han Yeji, in turn, says that if things continue like this, the boy won't have the opportunity to shine among the others. With that enormous attack, hundreds of enemies were defeated. But Shin comments that in a war, one can never be sure of the outcome until it is completely over. And then, amid all the destruction, a massive shadow emerges. That is the leader of the Pride faction, declaring that magic alone cannot stop him, and ordering the remaining subordinates to keep advancing. A player suggests that they continue using magic, and once again the attack begins forming in the sky. The orcs are advised to dodge and find a way to survive. Then the magic laser heads for the monsters. However, the commander moves forward to block it, not only managing to stop the spell, but also throwing it back toward the wall. The mages quickly try to form a shield to defend themselves, but they end up realizing that they are out of mana. Seeing that there is no way to avoid the attack, Shin quickly pulls Han Yeji out of harm's way. The girl thanks him for saving her, and the boy tells her to relax since they are teammates. Then they question what they should do because the castle walls have fallen, and yet the commander still hasn't moved. The orc starts laughing and says that humans are nothing special. After that, he orders the creatures to advance and make their opponents suffer. The members of the Sloth faction wonder what their leader is doing in this situation. After that, the monsters begin invading the player's territory. Han Yeji comments that, apparently, the defensive line is about to collapse, and Shin says that the commander still shows no signs of taking action. The girl, in turn, says that she is sure the rumored rookie will find a way to turn the game around. The young man remains silent as he thinks that if they defeat the enemy faction's captain, they could win. But he doesn't believe that he can handle it alone. However, the boy decides that he will do everything he can to win. A player falls right in front of the orc, and he advances to eliminate him. Luckily, the protagonist appears in time to save him. The monster smiles and comments that a worthy opponent has finally appeared. Shin, in turn, tells that player to stay back. The leader of the Pride faction admires the boy's courage for facing him alone. However, he advises him to call more friends. And the boy, in turn, responds that this will not happen because he does not want to share the XP from that fight. The orc then decides to see what his opponent is capable of. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.